Chapter 534. 3 clones self-destructed. In addition to the 2 clones that self-destructed at the beginning, Tanjiro had already self-destructed 5 clones. And now, only 4 clones remained. These 4 Tanjiros were all staring at the source of the explosion with bright and piercing eyes. At the same time, his spatial domain covered the entire courtyard. All of a sudden, the stones that were rolling or falling from above stopped. The entire courtyard was in a state of complete stillness. Tanjiro's 4 great clones frowned for a moment. Then, a smile slowly appeared on their faces. Lu Yushi, you finally died. Only by seriously injuring Lu Yushi with a sneak attack, and then self-destructing 5 clones did Tanjiro manage to kill Lu Yushi, who possessed astonishing defense. At the moment when Tanjiro killed Lu Yushi, he felt relief, sadness and other complicated emotions. The 4 great clones instantly fused into one. Tanjiro walked over to the location where Lu Yushi exploded. At this moment, there was a damaged battle armor, a storage divine artifact, and a pair of mid-quality heavenly divine artifact gloves on the ground. These were Lu Yushi's remnants. It was precisely because he discovered these remnants and Lu Yushi's soul ignition yuanying earlier that he was certain that Lu Yushi had died. Soul ignition yuanying. Even if no one attacked him, he would likely only be able to survive for several breaths of time. Chinyu's spatial energy from his universal world had been locked onto Tanjiro the entire time. I must kill him with a single strike. At this moment, this Tanjiro has yet to completely lose his vigilance. This is not the best time to launch a sneak attack. When he goes to pluck the 9-petaled magnificent lotus, that will be the best time to launch a sneak attack. Chinyu's body slightly arched. He was completely focused. He was ready to unleash his strongest attack at any moment. Tanjiro put away Lu Yushi's remnants. He felt carefree in his heart. After killing Lu Yushi, not only did he obtain a mid-quality heavenly divine artifact, and all of Lu Yushi's treasures, at the same time, the 9-petaled magnificent lotus was completely his. Tanjiro walked over to the pond where the 9-petaled magnificent lotus was. The intense battle from earlier did not affect the 9-petaled magnificent lotus in the slightest. The 9-petaled magnificent lotus was still emitting a faint black light. Especially its sparkling and translucent black lotus core. It was extremely attractive. Tanjiro stepped into the pond. Although this unitary heavy water was powerful, it was unable to kill heavenly deity level experts. This unitary heavy water is truly cold. Tanjiro's entire body quivered. After that, Tanjiro extended his hands into the bottom of the pond. Tanjiro needed to pull out the 9-petaled magnificent lotus from the bottom of the pond. He did not dare to pull out the lotus leaves. At this moment, Tanjiro's attention was completely focused on the 9-petaled magnificent lotus. This is the moment. A long spear suddenly appeared in Chinyu's hand. The originally black and simple divine spear waning snow now had a faint dark yellow color to it. There were very few of them, just like a few tiny dots. The divine spear waning snow. The divine spear waning snow that had absorbed an extremely small amount of heaven and earth energy. Teleport. Chinyu suddenly appeared behind Tanjiro, who was bending over and extending his hands into the first origin heavy water. With a flash, Chinyu's divine spear waning snow pierced through Tanjiro's head, as if it was piercing through leather. The divine spear waning snow had 2 auxiliary abilities, body splitting and soul devouring. Bang! Tanjiro's head instantly turned into fine powder. As for Tanjiro's body, it turned into 7 or 8 pieces. However, those 7 or 8 pieces actually turned into 3 Tanjiros in an instant. Chinyu was shocked. Why isn't he dead? His head has completely turned into fine powder. The soul within it has also completely scattered. Why are there still 3 clones? Chinyu was shocked. As for Tanjiro, he was even more shocked. Tanjiro had never thought that he would have his head blasted off by someone without him noticing. It's so close, yet worlds apart. It's that Chinyu. Tanjiro immediately understood. Fortunately, when I am not fighting, I will split my soul into 9 parts and place them in different parts of my body. Tanjiro was extremely cunning. His soul was capable of splitting into 9 parts. Normally, there would only be 1 part of his soul in his head. As for the other parts of his body, such as his chest, dantian, arms, The other 8 parts of his soul were all hidden in different places. This was a method that Tanjiro used to prevent himself from being killed by a surprise attack. This time around, this technique had saved his life. Chinyu had only destroyed one of his soul fragments, as well as the jade-blooded Jin Dan that belonged to that soul fragment. When divine power transforms into heavenly divine power, it will form a jade-green-colored Jin Dan. This jade-green-colored Jin Dan is called the jade-blooded Jin Dan. The jade-blooded Jin Dan is the core of the heavenly divine power. With the soul Yuanying as the core of the soul, the jade-blooded Jin Dan as the core of the heavenly divine power. In the minds of heavenly deity experts, it would generally be the soul Yuanying holding the jade-blooded Jin Dan Qin. You took a glance at the 3 clones. These 3 clones were all holding 3-section staffs. These 3-section staffs were formed by the 9-section whip. Even Chinyu had no choice but to admit that the craftsmanship of this 9-section whip was very high. Chinyu, you actually killed one of my clones with a sneak attack. However, you no longer have the chance to do so. Last time, I was unable to kill you, but this time, one of the clones sneered and said. At this moment, Tanjiro was still filled with confidence in being able to kill Chinyu. In Tanjiro's heart, Chinyu was merely a low-level heavenly deity who had merely relied on the remarkable ability so close, yet worlds apart. Once he, Tanjiro, attacked with his full strength, this Chinyu would undoubtedly die. 3 clones, I must kill all of them. Not a single one of them can escape. Chinyu began to think. Amen. You're actually not using that heavenly divine artifact sword. Tanjiro, who was on the left side of Chinyu, said with a frown. And right at this moment, Chinyu's figure suddenly appeared beside that Tanjiro on the right side. With a shake of his right arm, the divine spear waning snow in his hand began to spin and thrust forward. Wherever the divine spear waning snow passed, even the divine realm space would have a hair-thin spatial crack. Humph! This Tanjiro on the right side was extremely confident, as he used the 3-part stick in his hand to block Chinyu's spear. From Tanjiro's point of view, his mid-level heavenly divine artifact would be sufficient to block Chinyu's high-level heavenly divine artifact. However, Tanjiro's expression suddenly changed. His 3-part stick trembled and then cracked open. As for that spear, before Tanjiro's astonished expression, it directly pierced through his neck. Break! Chinyu shouted angrily. Tanjiro felt a strange energy spreading through the wound on his neck. After that, his head and chest were all turned into fine powder. His soul Yuanying and his blood jade Jin Dan were also turned into fine powder. The complexions of the other 2 Tanjiros turned pale. At the same time, their eyes were wide open. The first reaction of these 2 Tanjiros was to flee. Of the 2 Tanjiros, one was rushing toward the entrance of the tunnel, whereas the other Tanjiro was rushing toward the opposite direction, toward the underground mansion's inner room. What sort of weapon is that? It's not a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. Is it even more powerful than a high-quality heavenly divine artifact? Tanjiro felt that his heart was trembling. Could it be the legendary Grand Mist spiritual treasure? Tanjiro's heart was filled with fear. The great name of the Grand Mist spiritual treasure was something that ordinary deities would not know about. However, Tanjiro, a mid-level heavenly deity, had heard of it before. Merely he had never seen it before. Or perhaps, he would not be able to recognize it even if he saw it. Trying to run, seeing the 2 Tanjiros fleeing toward the opposite direction, Chinyu instantly made the decision to chase after the Tanjiro, who was fleeing toward the entrance of the tunnel. Chinyu felt that the Tanjiro, who was fleeing toward the underground mansion's inner room must, at the very least, open up a tunnel in order to escape. This would require some time. This amount of time would be sufficient for him to kill the other Tanjiro. Teleportation. Teleportation. After 2 consecutive teleportations, Chinyu arrived at the interior of the tunnel and just happened to block Tanjiro's path. Huff! Tanjiro's first reaction upon seeing Chinyu was to unleash his spatial domain. Then he smashed his stick toward Chinyu. Chi! The divine spear waning snow rapidly rotated and pierced forward. Like a dragon emerging from the sea, the tip of the spear possessed a bit of dark and yellow color. The sealed spatial domain was simply unable to stop the divine spear waning snow. When the attack was strong enough, even the spatial domain would be useless. After all, the current divine spear waning snow was already capable of creating minute spatial cracks in space. Bang! The 3 sections of the long stick were once again forcibly broken apart by the divine spear waning snow. The divine spear waning snow continued to pierce toward Tanjio's neck. Tanjio, who already knew that he would not be able to stop the divine spear waning snow, directly released his soul Yuanying and jade blood Jin Dan from his body. However, Qin Yu waved the divine spear waning snow in his hand. A weak dark and yellow aura surged out from the tip of the spear. The aura directly enveloped the soul Yuanying and jade blood Jin Dan. In an instant, they were turned into fine powder. There's one more. Qin Yu did not care about the corpse before him at all. He teleported once again. After teleporting twice, he arrived at the underground mansion. Qin Yu's universal world spatial power began to spread out. Qin Yu teleported 3 times with lightning speed and searched through the entire underground mansion. Only then did he discover that the situation was bad. With a movement of Qin Yu's body, he arrived at a study room at the back of the underground mansion. At this moment, there was actually a passageway on the wall of this study room. Qin Yu felt a burst of anger in his heart. A mistake, a mistake. This Tanjio has already been in this underground mansion for who knows how many years. How could there only be a single passageway? Although it has only been a short period of time. With his speed, he is likely already several tens of li away. My spatial power is only capable of searching within a range of 100 meters. Without an accurate direction, how am I supposed to find him? Qin Yu was completely unable to do anything about it. There was nothing he could do about it. This study room was located at the very back of the underground mansion. The room that Qin Yu was originally hiding in was rather far away from this place. Thus, Qin Yu simply did not discover that there was a secret passageway in this place. He had failed at the last step and allowed one of Tanjio's clones to escape. Forget about it. Even if this Tanjio is extremely lucky. However, so what if he managed to escape? Qin Yu did not really care about it. Although he discovered the secret of my teleportation, would others believe him if he were to tell others about it? Teleportation was a remarkable ability that only God Kings possessed. This was the iron law of the divine realm for 120 quadrillion years. Even if Tanjio were to tell others that someone possessed a remarkable ability similar to teleportation, how many people in the divine realm would believe him? Qin Yu also knew in his heart that although there would not be a lot of people that would believe him, it would still be troublesome. However, Tanjio had already escaped. Thus, Qin Yu could only console himself like this. With a flash of his body, Qin Yu arrived in the courtyard. Seeing the 9-petaled magnificent lotus in the unitary heavy water before him, Qin Yu displayed a smile on his face. For the sake of the 9-petaled magnificent lotus, a mid-level heavenly deity died. As for the other mid-level heavenly deity, 8 of his 9 great clones were lost. Qin Yu took a glance at the 9-petaled magnificent lotus. Then, his gaze turned to the divine spear waning snow in his hand. Although he had imagined the might of the divine spear waning snow, Qin Yu was still overjoyed when he actually used it. A mid-level heavenly deity was using a mid-quality heavenly divine artifact, whereas he was using his divine energy to use the divine spear waning snow. However, even with this being the case, the divine spear waning snow still managed to break his opponent's mid-quality heavenly divine artifact. It was already comparable to a second-rate Grand Miss spiritual treasure to begin with. And now its might has increased by a lot. I reckon that even if its might is inferior to a first-rate Grand Miss spiritual treasure, it's not far off. Qin Yu thought in his heart. Furthermore, the current divine spear waning snow had only absorbed a very small amount of the dark and yellow energy. Once it completely absorbed the dark and yellow energy, exactly how powerful would it be? Just thinking about it caused Qin Yu to become excited. If I didn't use the divine spear waning snow, and only relied on the high-quality, heavenly divine artifact divine sword scarlet blood, killing Tanjio would simply be a dream. However, by relying on the divine spear waning snow, I am able to trample him. A good weapon is truly different. Qin Yu felt the benefits of an exceptional weapon even more. With an intention, the divine spear waning snow returned to the universal world, and once again began to absorb the dark and yellow energy. The divine spear waning snow is the same as teleportation. Unless it's absolutely necessary, it's best to not use it. The deeper one hides one's trump card, the more effective it will be. Qin Yu thought in his heart. After that, Qin Yu looked to the pond before him. With merely an intention, the universal world's spatial energy enveloped the pond and the nine-petaled magnificent lotus. After that, the nine-petaled magnificent lotus and the pond of unitary heavy water both disappeared. They had arrived in the universal world. As for Qin Yu himself, he had also disappeared from the underground mansion and entered the universal world. Qin Yu stood on a grassland. The unitary heavy water and nine-petaled magnificent lotus were floating before Qin Yu. In the universal world, everything changed according to Qin Yu's will. With an intention, the unitary heavy water separated from the nine-petaled magnificent lotus. By refining the core of the nine-petaled magnificent lotus, one would be able to obtain a magnificent lotus clone. The magnificent lotus clone possesses the unitary heavy water domain. The toughness of its body even surpasses that of a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. Qin Yu felt a burst of carefreeness. What attracted him the most about the nine-petaled magnificent lotus was its core. Clones were very difficult to refine. That was because true clones required souls. How could ordinary people possibly be able to separate their souls? However, the core of the nine-petaled magnificent lotus was different. The core of the nine-petaled magnificent lotus was born from absorbing grand mist spiritual energy. The entire core of the nine-petaled magnificent lotus was a soul without consciousness. After Qin Yu successfully refined the core of the nine-petaled magnificent lotus, he only needed to leave a trace of his consciousness in it to obtain a clone. Furthermore, Qin Yu felt that the battle power of that clone might be even stronger than the main body. Let's combine this unitary heavy water with the unitary heavy water from the dark star. With an intention from Qin Yu, a ball of unitary heavy water floated in the air. At the same time, there was a ball of golden elemental heavy water and a golden bead beside the ball of water. That golden bead was extremely special. According to Qin Yu's estimation, it was impossible to refine it unless one's soul formed into a nascent soul. Right at the moment when Qin Yu was pondering, "Amen?" Qin Yu opened his eyes wide in shock. That golden bead flew toward the nine-petaled magnificent lotus by itself. At the same time, the black core of the nine-petaled magnificent lotus shot out a ray of black light. As for the golden bead, it also shot out a ray of golden light. The two rays of light actually began to intertwine with each other. Chapter 535. The nine-petaled magnificent lotus's black lotus core and the golden bead started to emit light at the same time. The black light emitted by the black lotus core and the golden light emitted by the golden bead were unceasingly intertwining with each other. Like a water pipe, the two different types of energy were actually being transmitted to each other. The black light was absorbed by the golden bead. As for the golden light, it was absorbed by the black lotus core. Seeing the scene in front of him, Qin Yu was extremely confused. I have never heard of this golden bead before. Why is it that when this golden bead encountered the nine-petaled magnificent lotus, such a change would occur? Qin Yu had read many of the golden scrolls from the bewitching god temple in these past years. He had especially memorized all kinds of rare medicinal herbs, ores and so on. However, he had never heard of this golden bead before. With an intention of his mind, Uncle Fu appeared beside Qin Yu. Uncle Fu was still deducing the formation arrays in the Jianglan's realm when the scene before him suddenly changed. When he saw Qin Yu, he immediately bowed and said, "Master, what matter does Master have?" "Uncle Fu, look at this." Qin Yu pointed to the golden bead and the nine-petaled magnificent lotus. Upon seeing the nine-petaled magnificent lotus, Uncle Fu was immediately shocked. He said in shock, "This 9 leaves, could it be the nine-petaled magnificent lotus? What is this golden bead?" Uncle Fu was unable to conceal his shocked expression. He looked to Qin Yu and asked, "Master, this nine-petaled magnificent lotus is extremely precious. This golden bead also seems to be precious. How did Master obtain it? Hearing what Uncle Fu said, Qinyu was slightly disappointed. Evidently, Uncle Fu did not recognize this golden bead at all. However, Qinyu still pointed to the 9-petaled magnificent lotus and said, Uncle Fu, this 9-petaled magnificent lotus was something that I was fortunate enough to obtain from the Black Dragon Pool. As for this golden bead, I obtained it from the immortal, devil and demon realm's Dark Star realm. Uncle Fu, I wish to ask, have you ever heard of or seen this golden bead before? I've seen this golden bead before. However, even though they're both golden beads, they're not necessarily the same thing. Master, tell me about the characteristics of this golden bead. Uncle Fu asked. Qinyu was overjoyed. Uncle Fu seemed to know something about the golden bead. This golden bead is extremely cold, and there is a golden liquid around it. Beyond that there is first yuan heavy water. I also knew about the golden liquid. It was the metal elemental heavy water, which was even colder than the first essence heavy water. But what exactly is this golden bead? I've searched through all the scrolls, but I couldn't find anything, Qinyu said helplessly. In order to investigate this golden bead, he had spent a lot of time searching for information. It's accompanied by golden elemental heavy water? Uncle Fu looked at the golden bead in shock. He saw that the golden bead was exchanging energy with the lotus heart of the 9-petaled magnificent lotus. Master, why is the lotus heart of the 9-petaled magnificent lotus connected with the golden bead? Are you the one controlling it, Master? No, it happened naturally. Uncle Fu, do you know anything about this golden bead? Qinyu looked at Uncle Fu. Uncle Fu frowned and shook his head. I don't know, but for it to be accompanied by golden elemental heavy water, it should be a grand spiritual treasure. However, I've followed Old Master for so many years, but I've never heard of a cold attribute spiritual treasure that looked like a golden bead. Hearing Uncle Fu say that he's never seen one, Qinyu was slightly disappointed. However, he was already prepared in his heart. Thus, he only nodded his head. Master, why don't you refine this golden bead? Uncle Fu asked curiously. This golden bead is too cold. It actually has the ability to freeze one's soul. According to my estimation, only those who have reached the nascent soul level will be able to refine this golden bead. Speaking of this, Qinyu thought of his soul's realm inside. Unfortunately, I've been a peak high-level deity for so many years. Not long ago, I researched formations for over 100,000 years and made some progress in formations. However, my soul still hasn't made a breakthrough. Uncle Fu comforted. Master, from high-level deity to heavenly deity, this checkpoint is extremely difficult. In the entire divine realm, who knows how many high-level deities are trapped in this checkpoint? Master, you'll know once you see how many high-level deities and heavenly deities there are in the Black Dragon Pool. Qinyu lightly smiled. How could he not understand this principle? Merely, after being trapped at the peak of high-level deity for so long, Qinyu was still a bit anxious. It would seem that I'll have to specially research and comprehend the spatial comprehension left behind by seniors with Qiumei. Qinyu made a decision in his heart. When my formation array research reaches level 4, I'll first break through to the heavenly deity level. Although Qinyu had reached level 3 formation arrays a long time ago, after training for so many years, he was only able to set up the higher level formation arrays among level 3 formation arrays. As for level 4 formation arrays, he was still unable to set up them. Qinyu was able to sense that the transformation between this golden bead and the 9-petaled magnificent lotus ought to be complementary to each other. It would benefit both of them, so Qinyu did not try to stop it. Master, when you're refining the divine spear waning snow, why didn't you place the divine spear waning snow into the Jianglan's realm to refine it? Uncle Fu suddenly asked. Uncle Fu knew that Qinyu was using the dark and yellow energy to increase the level of the divine spear waning snow. Uncle Fu thought that since the second layer of the Jianglan's realm would be able to save 100 times the time, why didn't he enter the Jianglan's realm? Qinyu shook his head helplessly and said, the divine spear waning snow is able to enter the Jianglan's realm. However, the dark and yellow energy is unable to leave the universal world. Speaking of this, Qingyu was also very confused. The divine spear waning snow had been absorbing for over 1,000 years in the universal world. However, it had only absorbed less than 1,000th of the large lump of dark and yellow energy. According to this speed, it would definitely take a very long time to complete the refinement. Qingyu wanted to move the dark and yellow energy into the Jianglan's realm to save time. However, the dark and yellow energy was unable to leave the universal world. Qingyu also had a sort of feeling in his heart. The growing universal world seemed to have a connection with the dark and yellow energy. Merely, this connection was something that the current Qingyu was still unable to understand. Qingyu had a premonition in his heart that when the universal world completely matured, he might be able to understand the secret of the dark and yellow energy. Currently, Qingyu only knew that the dark and yellow energy could be used to refine artifacts. Uncle Fu, let's enter the Jianglan's realm first. Qingyu said to Uncle Fu. Immediately, the two of them disappeared from the universal world. In the second layer space of the Jianglan's realm, Qingyu and Uncle Fu directly appeared outside of Qingyu's courtyard. Qingyu turned around and was about to enter the courtyard. Uncle Fu immediately said, "Master, there's a matter related to young Master Kuro that I need to tell you." Xiaohei. Qingyu's figure suddenly stopped. He turned around and looked to Uncle Fu. With a frown he said, "You said Xiaohei. What's wrong with Xiaohei?" Uncle Fu wanted to say something but hesitated. After hesitating for a moment he said, "Master, I am also unable to explain young Master Kuro's situation clearly. It's just that in recent days, young Master Kuro's training has entered into a special state. This old servant also does not know if this is good or bad." Amen. Qingyu immediately grew anxious. He stopped asking Uncle Fu and directly teleported to the outside of Kuro's training location with Uncle Fu. On top of the lone peak, one side of this lone peak seemed to have been cut by a blade. It was extremely steep. Kuro wore a white gown. His eyes were closed as he stood on top of the lone peak. He held the cloud-piercing spear in one hand. Occasionally, black spear silhouettes would burst forth. Qingyu merely observed for a moment and discovered something strange. The restriction of the Jianglan's realm was very low. With the speed of Kuro's spear, he could instantly thrust out tens of thousands of spear silhouettes. However, the current Kuro's spear thrust was not fast. Furthermore, Kuro had thrust out so many spear thrusts. The speed of each and every spear thrust was different. Master, young Master Kuro has already closed his eyes and trained like this for over 10,000 years. In these 10,000 plus years, young Master Kuro had been thrusting his spear like this the entire time. Young Master Kuro's spear thrusting speed was also not fast. He also did not use any divine energy. This old servant was also a bit worried. "That's why I decided to inform Master," said Uncle Fu. Qingyu was also unable to see any benefit from Kuro thrusting his spear like this. In the divine realm, there were indeed people who unceasingly practiced drawing their blades, thrusting their spears and so on. However, each and every one of those people's speed had reached the limit. Those people were all seeking the limit of speed. However, what about Kuro? His speed was not fast. It was only a medium speed. Furthermore, sometimes it would be faster, and sometimes it would be slower. Qingyu was certain that Kuro would not go mad. However, what use was there in training like this? Qingyu felt a burst of anger in his heart. He looked at Uncle Fu and angrily said, "Uncle Fu, why did you only tell me now?" Uncle Fu hurriedly said in a panic. For the past 10,000 years, Master had been deducing the array. This old servant did not dare to interrupt Master. Furthermore, this old servant saw that young Master Kuro's training. Although there was a problem, he would not go mad. Therefore, I only wanted to wait for Master to come out of seclusion before telling Master. However, when Master came out of seclusion, Master went out again. Therefore, this old servant waited until now to inform Master. Seeing Uncle Fu like this, Qingyu knew that it was wrong for him to be angry. Furthermore, he had sensed the change in the black dragon pool, and immediately went out. Uncle Fu did not have time to tell him, "Uncle Fu, it's my fault." However, Xiaohei is a brother that I grew up with. Qinyu looked at Kuro in the distance, and was also anxious. Xiaohei! Qinyu suddenly shouted. Kuro did not respond at all. He still stood on the lonely peak, constantly thrusting his spear at a normal speed. It seems that Xiaohei is completely focused, and has entered a special state. Qinyu had no choice but to use his divine sense to transmit his voice directly into Kuro's mind. Xiaohei, stop for a moment. Kuro's thrusting motion suddenly stopped. Then Kuro opened his eyes. Seeing Qinyu, Kuro's face was filled with joy. His entire body flashed and appeared in front of Qinyu. He said in ecstasy, "Big brother, long time no see. However, big brother, I was just cultivating for a while. Why did you interrupt me?" "A while? You've been in that state for 10,000 years. Qinyu said helplessly. 10,000 years? Kuro opened his eyes wide. Soon after, Kuro closed his eyes and sensed for a moment. He nodded. Indeed, it's been 10,000 years. I didn't expect time to pass so quickly. Qinyu suddenly noticed a change in Kuro. Xiaohei, you've reached the peak of high-level deity. Qinyu only noticed Kuro's progress at this moment. Qinyu remembered very clearly that 10,000 years ago, Kuro was only at the peak of mid-level deity. How did he catch up to him in such a short period of time? Kuro was also stunned. He was also confused for a moment. How did I reach the peak of high-level deity? Last time, I was only at the peak of mid-level deity. Although I felt that I was about to break through, how did I reach the peak of high-level deity in 10,000 years? Qinyu suddenly thought of a question. Kuro's cultivation method just now seemed to be some kind of special cultivation method. Kuro's rapid progress might have something to do with it. Thinking of this, Qinyu could not help but feel happy for his brother. Kuro, how did you practice your spear on the lonely peak for 10,000 years? Qinyu asked. Kuro shook his head and said, I can't explain it clearly. One day, when I was practicing my spear on the lonely peak, I suddenly had a very mysterious and special feeling in my heart. Then, I chased after that feeling and unceasingly practiced my spear. Today, I have a slight harvest in my heart. Moreover, I have a feeling that this cultivation method that I discovered, if I continue to practice it, should be very powerful. Qinyu's eyes lit up and he said, Xiaohei, try using your spear on me. Kuro's eyes also lit up. Haha, good. Big brother, you can try some of the things that I have figured out over the years. After saying that, Kuro reached out and grabbed the ground. A stone was immediately cut into a long spear. Holding the stone spear, Kuro stared at Qinyu. Qinyu did not dare to be careless. Just like Kuro, he also grabbed a stone spear. Big brother, you have to be careful. Kuro's eyes burst with light. Watch out! With a loud shout, the stone spear in Kuro's hand attacked. The moment Heiyu struck out with his spear, Qinyu felt as if his brain had stopped working. The stone spear's speed did not seem fast, but Qinyu felt that his speed was even slower. He struggled to move the stone spear in his hand to block Kuro's spear. Stop! Qinyu suddenly spoke. Big brother, what's wrong? Kuro asked in confusion. How was my attack earlier? This is a bit of comprehension that I have accumulated over 10,000 years. I feel that what I have comprehended now is still very little. I believe that with the accumulation of time, it might become a lot better. Qinyu looked at Kuro in astonishment. Even when he fought against Tanjiro, Qinyu did not have this sort of strange feeling. Kuro's spear attack was clearly not fast. Yet, when faced with Kuro's spear, it was very difficult for him to block it. Qinyu did not understand. Qinyu knew that if he were to fight against Kuro in the divine realm, if he were to not use the spatial power of the universal world, and only use the same weapon as Kuro, he might not even be a match for Kuro. Xiaohei, you are stronger than me, Qinyu said in a gratified manner. Big brother. Kuro could not help but be startled. All these years on the path of cultivation, Hofei and Kuro had always looked at Qinyu's back. They had always discovered that the gap between them and Qinyu was growing larger and larger. Never did they expect that Qinyu would admit defeat himself today. Train properly. Walk this path. Qinyu said encouragingly. Qinyu was actually mistaken. When he was at the origin realm for the stellar transformations, Qin Yu was still able to use the origin power. When he reached the universe realm, he was only able to use the spatial power. The universal world was something that Qin Yu had cultivated. It was Qin Yu's ability. In his heart, he felt that if he did not rely on the universal world and powerful weapons, he would not be a match for the current Xiaohei. This sort of thinking was simply too extreme. Chapter 536. The ocean of formation arrays was boundless. However, there was a pattern that could be followed. During the process of Qin Yu's deduction, a branch diagram naturally appeared in his mind. From simple to complex, he deduced one level at a time. There were very few level 1 formation arrays. However, the number of level 2 formation arrays was much greater. The number of level 3 formation arrays was even more astonishing. As his comprehension of the array path deepened day by day, Qin Yu instead became a bit intoxicated. Every time he deduced and comprehended an even more profound formation array, Qin Yu would feel a sense of accomplishment and conquest. The branch diagram of formation arrays in his mind also became more and more complicated. Ever since he created the universal world, Qin Yu had always placed the Jianglan's realm in the universal world when he was deducing formation arrays. In this sort of situation, Qin Yu felt that his deduction of formation arrays had become even more inspired. His deduction speed had also increased by a lot. For this sort of thing, Qin Yu could only think that it was because he was the creator of the universal world. While deducing formation arrays, one could not feel the passage of time. A profound formation array might require over 1,000 years. Having reached this level, Qin Yu also somewhat understood why trapping arrays were more important than killing arrays and defensive arrays. Killing arrays and defensive arrays were completely fused into trapping arrays, forming a whole. Only those who were able to perfectly fuse killing arrays, defensive arrays and trapping arrays could be considered as formation array masters. That was the level of level 4 formation arrays. In the blink of an eye, Qin Yu had already spent 180,000 years in the second layer space of the Jianglan's realm. As for Qin Yu himself, his eyes that had been closed for 180,000 years had finally opened. Within his eyes was a trace of a smile. I've finally succeeded. It's actually this hard to go from level 3 formation arrays to level 4 formation arrays. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. Having reached this level, Qin Yu also had an impulse. After deducing so many formation arrays, Qin Yu felt that the array path did not have too many secrets before him. He even had a sort of comprehension in his heart. It was as if he had discovered the essence of the array path. Compared to the 90,000 years that he had spent to comprehend the essence of the array path, it was much more complicated and profound. The first stage of the array path? Qin Yu smiled faintly, but in his heart, he immediately abandoned the first realm of array Dao that he had comprehended. This was because Qin Yu knew that the more he deduced, the more perfect the first stage of the array Dao would be. His achievements in the array Dao would also be higher in the future. Master, Uncle Fu said from outside the house. Qin Yu was Uncle Fu's master, and Uncle Fu could sense the changes in Qin Yu's condition. Naturally, he knew that Qin Yu had stopped his closed-door deduction. Pushing open the door, Qin Yu walked out and said with a smile, Uncle Fu, I've reached the 4th level of array formation. By the way, how long did it take you to reach the 4th level of array formation? And how long did it take you to reach the 5th level of array formation? Uncle Fu had been studying array formations and constantly deducing them. Uncle Fu replied, it takes hundreds of millions of years to reach the 4th level of array formation, and more than 1 billion years to advance from the 4th level to the 5th level. It was indeed very slow. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. In total, it took him close to 500,000 years, but he had already reached the threshold of the 4th level of array formation. His speed was close to 1,000 times faster than Uncle Fu. How long did it take Senior Cheho to reach the 4th level of array formation? Qin Yu asked. Uncle Fu shook his head. This old servant isn't sure how long Old Master spent on each level of array formation. I only know that Old Master spent 1 million years to comprehend the first stage of the array Dao. After that, He started from scratch and spent 1 billion years to comprehend the second stage of the array Tao. Comparing Old Master and Master's speed. Master's speed is 10 times faster than Old Master's. Indeed, Qin Yu only spent close to 90,000 years to comprehend the first stage of the array Tao. Qin Yu nodded slightly. Based on this speed, I would probably need 1 million years to reach the 5th level of array formation. I reckon that Senior Cheho only started to comprehend the first stage of the array Tao when he reached the 6th level of array formation. Qin Yu thought in his heart. In the array Tao, from the first level of array formation to the 6th level, it went from simple to complex. As for the 7th level of array formation and the 8th level of array formation, they were classified as simple. If one were to only rely on deduction, one would be able to continuously deduce even more complex arrays. Ultimately, one would only reach the 6th level of array formation. Uncle Fu, I'm going out for a while to see if that Tanjio has returned. It's been 180,000 years. Perhaps he thought that he was lucky enough to have returned. Qin Yu said with a smile. Remove the weeds by the roots. Uncle Fu promptly said. Master, there are 2 things that I must report. Speak. Qin Yu said directly. Uncle Fu nodded and said. After Master went into seclusion to deduce the array Tao, roughly 30,000 years later, Hong Yu and Lu Shui's souls reached the Great Perfection Realm and condensed their soul Jin Dan. 60,000 years later, Wu Lan also condensed his soul Jin Dan. 80,000 years later, that Wu He also condensed his soul Jin Dan. Qin Yu nodded slightly. The 4 of them had stayed at level 9 Demon Emperor level for a very long time. What about their divine tribulation? Qin Yu asked in amazement. Generally, people would first undergo the divine tribulation and then condense their soul Jin Dan. Other than people like Qin Yu, whose soul's cultivation speed was too fast, or people who deliberately suppressed their power. For the 4 level 9 demon emperors, firstly, their soul's cultivation speed was not fast. Secondly, they had already reached level 9 demon emperor level and did not suppress their power. What this old servant wanted to talk about is this. The 4 of them have already condensed their soul Jin Dan. However, even now, they are still unable to sense their divine tribulation. This matter is truly too strange, said Uncle Fu with a frown. Qin Yu was also startled. They had already condensed their soul Jin Dan, yet they were still unable to sense their divine tribulation? Even Qin Yu himself had also sensed his divine tribulation not long after he condensed his soul Jin Dan. However, these people had already condensed their soul Jin Dan for over 100,000 years. Master, this matter has also caused the 4 of them to be restless and anxious the entire time. This old servant is also unable to understand why it would be like this. This divine tribulation, no matter where it is, can be sensed, said Uncle Fu helplessly. Logically, regardless of whether it was in the divine realm or the immortal devil and demon realm, even if one were to hide in the mortal realm, one would still not be able to escape the divine tribulation. Suddenly, a light flashed through Qin Yu's mind. Could it be because of the universal world? Once Qin Yu thought of this, all of the doubts in his heart immediately disappeared. At the moment when he created the universal world, Qin Yu came to a realization. Within the universal world, he was the master of the universal world. Within the universal world, nothing could happen that went against his will. Even the divine tribulation could not descend upon the universal world without his consent. The Jianglan's realm is within the universal world. Although the Jianglan's realm possesses a space within it, it is actually only a spatial attribute spiritual treasure and cannot be considered as a true world. In other words, Hong Yu, Lu Shui, Wu Lan, and Wu He are all restricted by the laws of the universal world. Thinking like this, Qin Yu came to a complete understanding. In the universal world that he had created, the divine tribulation was simply unable to descend. Or perhaps, the divine tribulation was simply unable to sense this world. Thus it would naturally not descend. Uncle Fu, I know about this matter now. After some time, have them return to the divine realm. I believe that after they return to the divine realm, they will be able to sense when the divine tribulation will descend. Qin Yu said to Uncle Fu. Uncle Fu nodded and said, "Yes, this old servant will immediately inform them of this matter." "Uncle Fu, is there anything else?" Qin Yu remembered that Uncle Fu had said that he had two important matters to report. Uncle Fu immediately displayed a joyous expression and said, "Master, this is an extremely joyous matter. Just 30,000 years ago, that is 150,000 years after Master had entered seclusion training, young Master Kuro stopped his training. That was because young Master Kuro's soul had reached the soul transformation nascent soul level. Furthermore, after spending several thousand years, he had completely transformed the divine energy within his body into heavenly divine energy and became the bloodshed righteous Jin Dan. Xiaohei made a breakthrough? Xiaohei became a low-level heavenly deity? Qin Yu truly did not expect that after Kuro stepped onto that special path of cultivation, his speed of improvement would actually be this fast. Uncle Fu also had a face filled with admiration. Young Master Kuro's cultivation speed is truly astonishing. This old servant has followed old master for so many years, yet I have never seen someone with such a fast cultivation speed and such a strange cultivation method. Logically, with how many geniuses there are in the divine realm, all kinds of cultivation methods should have been created by their predecessors. The appearance of a new cultivation method is a very rare thing. I truly never expected that young Master Kuro. As Uncle Fu said those words, he even sighed. Qin Yu smiled. His stellar transformation martial technique was likely something that no one in the divine realm knew. As for Kuro's cultivation method, Qin Yu did not know much about it. It didn't matter if he did not know about it. From Qin Yu's point of view, it would be fine as long as Xiaohei's strength increased. Where is Xiaohei now? Qin Yu had a happy smile on his face. Uncle Fu said, young Master Kuro is currently training on that lonely mountain peak again. However, young Master Kuro's spear thrusting speed is sometimes fast and sometimes slow. It has become even more strange. Don't worry about him. Just let him train like this. Qin Yu gives a haha laugh. Perhaps he will be able to explain it to everyone one day, when Heiyu has completely comprehended that path's practice method. Master, you're not going to see young Master Kuro? Uncle Fu asked. No, I'm going out. Qin Yu slightly nodded. He then disappeared from the Jianglan's realm. In the eastern region of the divine realm, in the ravine of the Black Dragon Pool, one of the three major powers of the Yuchi city. At this moment, a person suddenly appeared in the enormous lake with a circumference of 100 miles. However, in the blink of an eye, that person had already disappeared. After using teleportation several tens of times in succession, Qin Yu arrived at the dense mountain forest above the ravine. Standing on top of the soft fallen leaves, Qin Yu's universal world spatial energy started to spread out. After 1,800 years of growth, the range of the universal world spatial energy had once again increased. It now covered an area of nearly 200 meters. Never would I have expected that Tanjiro to be this cunning. He is not present in the underground mansion. He is also not present in the palaces. Qin Yu gasped in admiration. In an instant earlier, Qin Yu had already covered the three palaces with his spatial energy. Qin Yu only discovered Meiji and Taoist Lu Su. As for the nine-headed black dragon Tanjiro, he was nowhere to be seen. From the looks of it, even after all these years, the Black Dragon Pool still has that many people. Qin Yu had already sensed that a small patrol squad had entered the range of his spatial energy. Qin Yu began to move. No matter what, he always maintained a distance of 200 meters from that patrol squad. In the dense mountain forest, it was simply impossible for anyone to discover him within 200 meters. There were a total of 10 people in this patrol squad. These 10 people, Qin Yu was able to clearly see even the hair on their faces. 10 people, 6 men and 4 women. The blonde woman leading the patrol squad sighed and said, "Sigh. Ever since that heavenly deity Qin Yu fought against us, he had disappeared. In these past 1,800 years, countless people have been searching for him." The black-skinned man beside her said, 1,800 years ago, the rumor that spread from Yuchi City was truly astonishing. A low-level heavenly deity actually possessed that many treasures. No wonder many heavenly deities from the eastern region of the divine realm rushed over here to kill Qin Yu and seize his treasures. A petite and exquisite brown-haired woman humphed and said, "It would be best for that heavenly deity Qin Yu to not appear. If he were to appear, as long as he was discovered by a single heavenly deity, I reckon those heavenly deities that coveted his treasures would all gather here." This news has already spread through the entire eastern region of the divine realm. It is said that even heavenly deities from the western region, southwest region, and various other places know about it. The weakest youth in this patrol squad said mysteriously, "Let me tell you all, this rumor was spread from our black dragon pool. Don't speak nonsense." Immediately, there were people that did not believe him. That youth immediately said, "Don't you all doubt it. This is something that my big brother personally told me." 1,800 years ago, Lady Meiji and Lady Lu Su had personally selected some of their trusted aides to spread this news in Yuchi City. Oh, that's right, you all had best not spread this news. Otherwise, Lady Meiji and the others would definitely not forgive me. The blonde-haired woman leading the patrol squad immediately shouted, "Shut up! Do not speak of this again in the future." Yes, yes. That youth immediately complied. He was only a low-level deity. If it wasn't for his relationship with his big brother, it would be impossible for him to be summoned into the Black Dragon pool. Normally his status was relatively low. Thus, he could only rely on speaking of some secrets to attract the attention of others. The blonde-haired woman immediately sighed and said, "That heavenly deity Qin Yu's strength is very good. I truly do not know who will obtain those treasures in the end. High-quality heavenly divine artifact, and that magnificent lotus. It seems like he also has some sort of extraordinary ability that caused so many heavenly deities to be envious of him. With that many heavenly deities besieging him, it is said that there are even high-level heavenly deities. However, all of these are unrelated to us deities." The black-skinned man shook his head and sighed. As for Qin Yu, who heard all of this from not far away, his complexion had turned ashen. The worst situation had finally occurred. This sort of situation was something that Qin Yu had already anticipated. Merely, Qin Yu had always been unwilling for this sort of thing to happen. That was because if it were to happen, it would force him, Qin Yu, to unleash a massacre. Must we go to that extreme? A cold light flashed through Qin Yu's eyes. Chapter 537. Among the 8 great sacred grounds of the divine realm, the floating snow city in the North Pole was a city floating in midair. The city walls of the city were 20 zhang tall, and were mainly made up of huge black stones. It was as if a ferocious beast was coiled up. The entire floating snow city was born during the birth of the divine world. There were many strange things about the floating snow city. Although the floating snow city looked ordinary, even if a heavenly god expert attacked with all his might, it would be hard for him to leave a mark on the walls of the floating snow city. The floating snow city was constantly covered in snow. Snowflakes covered every corner of the floating snow city. However, when the snowflakes landed on the ground, they would naturally seep into the black ground and disappear. There weren't many people living in the floating snow city. There were only about 10,000 heavenly god experts, and the North Pole Saint Emperor's clan, the Jiang clan. The clan of the utmost North Sage Emperor was also known as the Imperial clan. The utmost North Sage Emperor himself, as well as the other members of the royal family, normally lived in the most central inner city of Snowfall City. Only the god kings of the royal family were exceptions, and did not live in the inner city. Jianglan, one of the 3 great god kings of the floating snow city. Out of the 3 great god king experts in floating snow city, he was the most low-profile god king. He, Jianglan, did not care about the matters of the utmost North Imperial clan. He also ignored the orders of the utmost North Sage Emperor. He lived in a mansion on the eastern side of the floating snow city. There was a plaque above the entrance of the mansion, and there were 2 words on the plaque, Wood Mansion. This Wood Mansion was Jianglan's mansion in the floating snow city. This mansion had existed for about the same amount of time as the divine realm. Snowflakes swirled in the air. A group of 5 people were walking side by side on the streets of the floating snow city. These 5 people were the 5 company captains of the floating snow city's heavenly deity army. One of them was a high-level heavenly deity, and the other 4 were mid-level heavenly deities. The 5 of them all wore the same long robes made of black silk, with 2 golden snowflakes embroidered on the cuffs. At this moment, the group of 5 had reached the entrance of the wood mansion. They stopped and raised their heads to look at the wood mansion. The heavenly astral mansion is so lively, and there are so many disciples, but this wood mansion has so few disciples, and it's too quiet. Oh right, big brother Gu Liang, when will the wood mansion be recruiting disciples? A sturdy man with a resolute face turned his head and asked the person closest to him. Gu Liang was the high-level heavenly deity among these 5 individuals. He also possessed the hope of being promoted to become the great captain of the floating snow city's heavenly deity army. Gu Liang touched his aquiline nose, shook his head and said, "It's rare for the wood mansion to summon disciples. The last time they summoned disciples was more than 10 billion years ago. Up until now, the wood mansion has only 12 disciples. Sigh, if I had been a little more careful back then, I might have been able to defeat Liang Luo and become a member of the wood mansion." 12. The only youth with snow-white skin among the 4 frowned and said, "The heavenly astral mansion seems to have a few hundred disciples. Furthermore, the wood mansion's history is not much shorter than the history of the god realm. This divine king of the wood manor." Gu Wu snorted coldly and said, "Although Heaven's Heart Divine King has many disciples, how long has it been since he reached the Divine King realm? The Wood Manor's God King reached the God King realm at about the same time as His Majesty the Sage Emperor. You don't know this, but there are differences between God Kings. If I can get some pointers from the Wood Mansion's God King, I'm sure my improvement will be huge." Big brother Gu Ming, over 10 billion years ago, you were already a mid-level heavenly deity, no? I remember that time when the Wood Mansion recruited 2 disciples. The competition was very intense. In the end, one of them was a high-level heavenly deity, and the other was a mid-level heavenly deity. However, of the 12 disciples of the Wood Mansion, it is said that 6 of them are only low-level heavenly deities, right? The resolute-faced man asked. Gu Ming nodded. That's right. I also do not know why the Wood Mansion's God King would suddenly take those 6 low-level heavenly deities as disciples. Sigh. Furthermore, I've obtained some insider information that the Wood Mansion's God King can only have a maximum of 12 disciples. Only when someone dies in battle would he summon them again. Suddenly, Gu Ming's expression changed. He glanced toward the distance and promptly said, "It seems like there are people from the Wood Mansion in the distance. It is very possible that the person leading them is the Wood Mansion's God King. Quickly move to the side. Do not offend Lord God King." Upon hearing that, the other 4 mid-level heavenly deities were also shocked. Wood Mansion's God King? The Wood Mansion's God King rarely comes out. Thus, very few people have seen the Wood Mansion's God King. However, Gu Ming, an extremely old heavenly deity, had seen the Wood Mansion's God King before. These 5 people immediately moved to the corner of the street. A man and a woman. Both of them wore cyan-colored silk gowns. The 2 of them were respectfully walking behind the 5 people. These 2 people were the personal attendants of the Wood Mansion's God King. They had followed the Wood Mansion's God King for a very long time. The 2 of them were both high-level heavenly deities. Standing before the 2 of them was the Wood Mansion's God King with an indifferent smile on his face. Jianglan. Jianglan wore a black and golden silk gown. He was emitting an ancient aura. There were very few people in the Wood Mansion. There were a total of 12 disciples. However, no one dared to be disrespectful toward the people of the Wood Mansion. When Jianglan walked to the entrance of the Wood Mansion, he took a glance at the 5 people not far from him. He merely lightly smiled, crossed the threshold and entered the Wood Mansion. "Chuji, how is Li Air right now?" Walking on the winding corridor, Jianglan asked the male attendant behind him. Chuji also had a smile on his face. He said, "Your lordship, Miss Li Air has been very happy these days, especially after she obtained news of young Master Qin Yu. However, young Master Qin Yu has caused a bit of a stir this time around. He has caused many heavenly deities of the entire eastern region of the divine realm to go and find trouble for him. Even some heavenly deities from the western region, southern region, southwest region, and various other regions have rushed over after hearing the news. Miss Li Er is also worried for young Master Qin Yu. The female attendant Ji Xiao beside him also smiled and said, Miss Li Er has truly trained hard these days. When she returned from the mortal realm, she was only a low-level heavenly deity. Never would I have expected that in such a short period of time, she would reach the peak of mid-level heavenly deity. For the sake of young Master Qin Yu, Miss Li Er has truly endured hardships. Jiang Lan had a gratified smile on his face. What I admire the most about little Yu is the trace of true temperament that still exists in the depths of his heart. It is no wonder a Mei would choose him. As he said this, Jiang Lan's expression grew a bit dim. Your lordship. Ji Xiao and Chu Ji glanced at each other. They both knew that what had happened back then had struck their lordship Jiang Lan with too great of an impact. After a short moment, Jiang Lan recovered. He smiled indifferently and said, It's fine. According to my investigation, little Yu's current strength is not even at the low-level heavenly deity level. However, he was able to cause such a stir. Little Yu's potential is truly enormous. Merely this child is still a bit soft-hearted. I am worried that he would not be able to defeat that brat from the Zhou clan. Soft-hearted? Isn't it precisely because of this that your lordship likes young Master Qin Yu? Ji Xiao said with a smile. Jiang Lan immediately smiled. Let's not mention it anymore. Let's not mention it anymore. I am confident in little Yu. He has inherited the bewitching God Temple. His comprehension of formation arrays is also pretty good. Furthermore, that strange martial technique of his, I have always felt that it is extraordinary. If he is given enough time, he ought to be able to satisfy Big Brother, Jiang Lan said with a smile. After that, he continued to walk onward. The wood mansion was extremely large. It was a large mansion with 7 entrances and 7 exits. There were 4 gardens. As for Li Er, she lived in a pavilion in the inner part of the wood mansion. She was attended to by 2 maids. In front of the place where Li Er lived was a garden. There were no flowers or plants in this garden. There was only a single tree that was close to 10 meters tall. It was a black tree that a person could wrap their arms around. At this moment, there were 2 maids chatting with each other in this garden. That was because Li Er was quietly training. Thus, they naturally could not disturb her. Big Sis Lian, this black tree that is only 10 meters tall is said to be as old as the wood mansion. A purple-clothed woman pointed to this black tree and said. The green-clothed Lian beside her shook her head and said, I don't think that's possible. It is said that the wood mansion has a history of over 100 million years. It is not far from the history of the divine realm. What kind of tree would be this big after growing for so long? Big Sis Lian, you must believe me. I have also heard about this from Lord Chu Ji and the other lords when they were chatting. This black tree seems to be called something like the ancient ironwood tree. That purple-clothed woman said. Lu Xiang, ancient ironwood tree? What kind of tree is the ancient ironwood tree? This Lian had never heard of the ancient ironwood tree before. That Lu Xiang was about to say something. However, when she saw 3 people walk in from the entrance of the garden, she immediately stood up. Seeing this, Lian also stood up. Respectfully, she stood to the side. Your lordship. Jiang Lan nodded. He took a glance at the ancient ironwood tree. This ancient ironwood tree was the most ancient and most precious tree in the divine realm. At the same time, it was also the only one. Back then, when Jiang Lan reached the God King level, he just so happened to discover the sapling of the ancient ironwood tree. After that, he established the wood mansion and placed this ancient ironwood tree in the wood mansion. This ancient ironwood tree was indeed as old as the wood mansion. Chu Ji, you all can wait below. Jiang Lan instructed, and then walked up the stairs. He directly arrived at the top of the pavilion building. The entrance to the pavilion building opened by itself. Inside the pavilion building, Li Er was sitting cross-legged on a praying mat. She was wearing a loose white gown. The skin that was exposed from the gown was as white as snow. Her eyes were slightly closed. Her beautiful hair had already reached the ground. Her expression was extremely tranquil. The corners of Jianglan's mouth were slightly raised. Li-er. Immediately, a peculiar change occurred to the space where the pavilion building was located. It was as if it had entered a space-time, isolated from the outside world. Li-er also naturally woke up. At the moment when she saw Jianglan, Li-er's face immediately blossomed with a smile. At the moment when her smile blossomed, it was as if the world had lost its color. Uncle Lan, you've returned? Did you manage to obtain news about Big Brother Qin? Li-er hurriedly stood up. Her long hair casually draped down all the way to her buttocks. Jianglan smiled and nodded. Oh, it's been so long since you've seen Uncle Lan. The first time you saw me, you didn't even ask about your Uncle Lan, and instead directly asked about your big brother Qin. This is truly Uncle Lan. Li-er's face instantly turned red. Chapter 538. Jianglan had a gratified smile on his face. He then walked to the side and sat down on the chair. As for Li-er, she also walked to Jianglan's side and sat down. Jianglan examined Li-er. He nodded and said in satisfaction, "Your cultivation speed is pretty good. Continue to work hard. Strive to reach the high-level heavenly deity level by the time you meet little you again." Amen. Li-er's face was still slightly red. Soon after, Li-er asked, "Uncle Lan, over 1,000 years ago, the news that was spread from the eastern region of the divine realm caused all those heavenly deities to want to kill Big Brother Qin. How is he now? Is Big Brother Qin all right?" Li-er was still worried about him. Jianglan chuckled and said, "Rest assured, little Yu has not shown himself for over 1,000 years. I have even searched the entire divine realm, but was unable to find him. I reckon that he is in the Jianglan's realm." Even Jianglan was unable to imagine that Qin was able to create his own world. Jianglan's realm? Uncle Lan, thank you, Li-er said gratefully. Li-er knew in her heart that the reason why her big brother Qin was able to keep his life was mostly because of the Jianglan's realm. Furthermore, Li-er also knew how important the Jianglan's realm was to Uncle Lan. For Uncle Lan to be able to give his #1 spiritual treasure to Qin, how could Li-er not be grateful to him? Jianglan shook his head and said with a smile, "Well then, there's no need for thanks. You ought to know that with my strength, the possibility of me using the Jianglan's realm is too small. In order to force me to use the Jianglan's realm, it would only be possible if a true divine realm war were to occur." A true divine realm war? Li-er said in confusion. There are true and false divine realm wars? The divine realm war that occurs once every 6 billion years is merely the divine realm war that everyone in the divine realm knows about. In fact, there are many things that ordinary people and even heavenly deities do not know about. Well then, when it's time for you to know, I will tell you. For now, all you need to do is to train at ease. Jianglan comforted. Li-er nodded obediently. Li-er suddenly said, "Uncle Lan, a few days ago, Imperial Father came to talk to me." Jianglan immediately stopped smiling. "When did this happen?" Jianglan asked. Li-er thought for a moment and said, "It was about 300 years ago. At that time, Uncle Lan, you weren't in Floating Snow City. Father and I had a heart-to-heart talk." Li-er had a helpless look on her face. If her father forced her to marry someone else, Li-er would rather die than submit. In that case, her father would not be able to do anything to her. However, her imperial father had a heart-to-heart talk with her, which made Li-er feel somewhat helpless. Big Brother still hasn't given up? Jianglan breathed out 2 breaths from his nose. Li-er, how about this? From today on, I will leave a clone in the Wood Mansion. I shall see whether or not Big Brother will come again. Li-er's heart immediately relaxed. In the utmost northern region's Floating Snow City, there were 3 great god kings. Among them, the utmost north sage emperor, and the Wood Mansion's god king had reached the god king level a long time ago. These 2 people were also the most valiant. Compared to the Floating Snow City's Heaven Heart god king, they were much stronger. Li-er knew that although her imperial father might not give the Heaven Heart god king face, he would not truly fight against Uncle Lan. Especially since her imperial father still owed Uncle Lan. Well then, Li-er, you can continue to stay here at ease. There is no need for you to concern yourself with other matters. Jianglan stood up. Li Er hurriedly stood up to see Jianglan off. Jianglan smiled in a gratified manner. He then walked out of the pavilion, walked down the stairs and left. Your lordship. Chu Ji and Ji Xiao, the two attendants that had followed Jianglan the longest, followed after him. The image of Li Er quietly training was still in Jianglan's mind. Li Er's appearance when she trains is exactly the same as her. When Jianglan thought of this, he felt a burst of pain in his heart. Even today, Jianglan was unable to forget the figure that floated down from the sky, the two most dazzling sparkling and translucent teardrops, and the exceptionally beautiful face that still had a miserable smile on it before her death. That scene was forever engraved in his soul. He was unable to forget it. Amei, you've chosen Li Er and little you. Thus, I will use my life to protect them. Jianglan said resolutely in his heart. Eastern region of the Divine Realm. Inside Yuqi City, when the utmost northern region's floating snow city's dark curtain of night covered the entire Divine Realm, Yuqi City had also placed a curfew. According to the rules of Yuqi City, no one was allowed to stay on the streets of Yuqi City during the night. The majority of Yuqi City had returned to tranquility. However, there were special privileges in every place. There were also some special places. The Pity Fragrant Building was an extremely bustling place in Yuqi City. Especially at night, this place was brightly lit. No army would come here to investigate. That was because those who were able to enter the Pity Fragrant Building were either people with authority or wealth. Every day, there would be upper echelons of Yuqi City gathered here. The Pity Fragrant Building occupied an enormous amount of space. It was separated into many different areas. Pity Fragrant Building. Inside the Guest Welcoming Hall. The Guest Welcoming Hall could be considered to be the largest hall in the Pity Fragrant Building. However, there were not a lot of seats in the Guest Welcoming Hall. There were only 24 seats. One would need to spend an extremely large amount of divine spiritual stones in order to be qualified to sit in one of the 24 seats. At this moment, there were 18 women wearing extremely thin gauze gowns, dancing a special dance in the Guest Welcoming Hall. The gauze gowns worn by these 18 women were so thin that one could practically see their bodies. However, the dance that these 18 women were dancing caused one's heart to feel relaxed and happy. It was an absolutely beautiful enjoyment. Instead, it caused one to not care about carnal desires. On the two sides of the main hall were 12 seats. Among them, there were 2 seats close to each other. At this moment, Qin Yu was sitting on one of the 12 seats. Shi Shuang, don't talk about that Qin Yu. To be honest, I admire this Qin Yu greatly. He is merely a low-level heavenly deity. Yet, he dared to kill his way into the Black Dragon pool. Furthermore, he killed a low-level heavenly deity and seriously injured 2 others. Even that Lord Black Dragon went into hiding. Amazing, truly amazing, said the fatty beside Qin Yu to Qin Yu. This fatty was called Chu Lu Qing. According to the fatty, one must be lenient in all aspects. Fatty Chu, I've heard that a lot of people are trying to kill that Qin Yu for the treasures that Qin Yu possesses. Qin Yu said, truth be told, after coming to Yuqi City to investigate for so long, Qin Yu discovered that there were actually several versions of the rumors. The reason why rumors were only rumors was because even if the rumors were true at the beginning, they would become outrageous as they continued to spread. Had treasures. Fatty Chu glanced at the beautiful woman, performing in front of him, with his beady black eyes. Then he snorted and said, what treasures does that Qin Yu possess? Who knows? Some people say that Qin Yu possesses 2 high-quality heavenly divine artifacts, a large amount of rare treasures, a 7-colored magnificent lotus, and some top-notch cultivation abilities. Motherfucker, those people that spread the rumors, what do they think that Qin Yu is? He is merely a low-level heavenly deity. Do they think that he is a god king? That many treasures? I do not believe it. Fatty Chu pulled Qin Yu's arm and said, hey Shishuang, I've also heard another version that is even more exaggerated. Someone actually said that Qin Yu possesses a remarkable ability similar to teleportation. Motherfucker, those people that spread the rumors don't even consider the reasonableness of the rumors. Truly laughable. Qin Yu lightly nodded his head. However, he was thinking in his heart, Fatty Chu, I actually possess even more treasures than the rumors you all spread. Furthermore, I also know teleportation. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you about that. The several versions of the rumors that were spread all had some similarities. Qin Yu definitely possesses a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. Qin Yu possesses some rare treasures. Qin Yu is a low-level heavenly deity. Fatty Chu. An old man beside him said with a smile. I've heard you mention that Qin Yu. Let me tell you, don't you believe me? That Qin Yu definitely possesses a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. Furthermore, he also possesses a fire attribute treasure. He is merely a low-level heavenly deity. For him to possess that many treasures, there are definitely a lot of people that want to fight over them. Fatty Chu knew that old man. After all, they frequently met in the Pity Fragrant building. Merely a low-level heavenly deity? That's easy for you to say. If Qin Yu was before you, would you dare to say that? Fatty Chu ridiculed. The number of heavenly deities in the divine realm was extremely small. After all, only a single heavenly deity would appear in a million deities. The majority of the heavenly deities that appeared in Yuchi City were gathered in Mount Dazzling Gold. The number of heavenly deities that remained in Yuchi City numbered less than 100. With that many heavenly deities, the majority of them were bitterly training. For a single heavenly deity to come here to enjoy themselves, it was already extremely rare. That Tanjio had deliberately schemed to kill me. Or perhaps he wanted to force me to not dare to come out. However, it would appear now that the might of the rumors is still within a tolerable range. Qin Yu drank the wine in his wine cup in one gulp. Qin Yu was most worried about his teleportation ability, or his 9-petaled magnificent lotus being discovered. However, it would appear now that the 9-petaled magnificent lotus had never appeared in the rumors. Merely, someone had mentioned the 7-colored magnificent lotus. Furthermore, among the several versions of the rumors, the one about teleportation was the one that no one believed the most. This Tanjio did not announce the 9-petaled magnificent lotus. Instead, he only announced the 7-colored magnificent lotus. Could it be? Qin Yu's heart moved. Could it be that this Tanjio is planning to act as the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind? Is he worried that the 9-petaled magnificent lotus would lure out two powerful experts and cause him to be unable to act as the oriole? The preciousness of the 9-petaled magnificent lotus was most definitely capable of attracting high-level heavenly deities. It might even be possible for 1 or 2 god kings to appear. In the guests' welcoming palace, the 18 nearly naked women withdrew. A charming woman wearing a large red cheongsam-like dress walked over. She glanced at the crowd and said, "Everyone please quiet down. Now, let us welcome the dual masters of the zither and flute from the failing realm." Everyone knows about the abilities of these twin sisters in the zither and flute. I believe everyone should be very familiar with them. Thus, I will not bother to explain too much. Today is the day where they will perform once a year. I have come here today precisely to listen to the performance of the dual masters of the zither and flute. Fatty Chu was the first to shout. Immediately, the guest welcoming palace became bustling with noise and excitement. Qin Yu raised his wine cup and indifferently looked at the 2 pretty women playing in the side hall of the main hall. The only thing separating the side hall from the main hall was a beaded curtain. The zither and flute were playing in unison. The sound resonated through the entire main hall. Everyone in the guest welcoming palace felt as if they had entered into a world of zither and flute sounds. They were completely immersed in it and forgot about their surroundings. In this main hall, only Qin Yu was still sober. During the process of the zither and flute playing in unison, suddenly, 2 men that looked exactly the same walked in from the entrance of the guest welcoming palace. 2 low-level heavenly deities? Qin Yu looked to the 2 men in shock. The attendants outside the guest welcoming palace were simply unable to obstruct the 2 men. After the 2 men entered the main hall, they began to quietly listen to the sound of the zither and flute. After the zither and flute finished playing, these 2 men with grim expressions both clapped their hands in happiness. One of them said, Never would I have expected that there would actually be music experts in Yuchi City that could perform the zither and flute to such a level. The charming woman who was originally hosting the program, wearing a bright red dress, promptly walked over. Lord Heavenly Deities, welcome to our pity-fragrant building. This woman's eyesight was truly fierce. She actually managed to recognize that these two men were heavenly deities. Recently, there have been quite a lot of heavenly deities coming to the pity-fragrant building. Practically all of them are from other places. They've all come for that Chinyu. These two men should also be from other places. Fatty Chu said to Chinyu with a low voice while smiling. Oh. Chinyu raised his brows. It would appear that a lot of people thought that he was a low-level heavenly deity and was easy to bully. I've heard that your pity-fragrant building's heaven-numbered pavilions are very famous. Arrange 2 heaven-numbered pavilions for us brothers, said one of the 2 low-level heavenly deities proudly. That charming woman, wearing a bright red dress, promptly said, Lord Heavenly Deities, our pity-fragrant building has a total of 3 heaven-numbered pavilions. As for these 3 heaven-numbered pavilions, they have already been booked by 3 other heavenly deities for an entire 100 years. Even many of the earth-numbered pavilions have been booked by heavenly deities. Go and tell them that we are the Wu Clan brothers. I believe they'll know once they do, said one of the 2 men proudly. That red-gowned woman lowered her voice and said, Lord Heavenly Deities, of the 3 heavenly deities that have booked the 3 heaven-numbered pavilions, 2 of them are mid-level heavenly deities. As for the other one, he is the leader of these 2 mid-level heavenly deities. The Wu Clan brothers were immediately startled. Chinyu stood to the side. He couldn't help but frown. They've all come for me. Of the 3 heavenly deities that have lived in the heaven-numbered pavilions, 2 are mid-level heavenly deities and 1. Could it be that he's a high-level heavenly deity? If he was a high-level heavenly deity, it would be difficult for Chinyu. Chapter 539. Lianfang Building Guest Welcoming Hall. The Wu Clan brothers, who were originally incomparably arrogant and callous, upon hearing that there were heavenly deities living in the 3 heaven-ranked pavilions, and that the weakest among those 3 heavenly deities was a mid-level heavenly deity, the Wu Clan brothers immediately did not dare to be arrogant anymore. If a low-level heavenly deity were to fight against a mid-level heavenly deity without a heaven-defying weapon, like a grand mist spiritual treasure, then they would only be courting death. Lord Deities, have the 2 of you decided where to stay? The red-robed woman asked in a gentle voice. Her watery eyes stared at the 2 people in front of her. At this moment, in the guest hall, Chu Luqing and the other guests naturally included Chinyu, who was using the pseudonym Shi Shuang. The group of people all looked at the 2 heavenly gods. The Wu brothers' faces turned somewhat ugly under the gazes of the group of people. There was even a trace of reddish-purple on their faces. After all, they had been a little too arrogant just now, and now they were in a difficult position. Big brother, let's stay in the Earth Pavilion. Wu Lu's expression was unsightly as he sent a voice transmission to his big brother. Wu Gang also nodded, and then glanced at the people in the reception hall. Fatty Chu and others were scared, and immediately forced a smile. Wu Gang looked at the red-robed woman with satisfaction and said coldly, Prepare 2 Earth-ranked lofts for us. Also hire maids to serve us. If they can't satisfy us, don't blame us for tearing them apart. The red-robed woman smiled sweetly and said, Don't worry, heavenly deities. I will definitely satisfy you. Humph. Wu Gang snorted coldly before walking out of the guest hall with Wu Lu. After the Wu Clan brothers all left the guest welcoming hall, the guest welcoming hall that had an oppressive atmosphere from earlier immediately became noisy. Everyone in the guest welcoming hall was discussing about the heavenly deities from earlier. Thus, they also talked about the heavenly deities that were staying in the pity-fragrant building. They also talked about the target of these heavenly deities. Chinyu. That Chinyu is most definitely afraid that so many heavenly deities have gathered in Yuchi City to kill him. That's why he hasn't come out for over 1,000 years. The people in the palace hall were already talking about Chinyu. Chinyu smiled helplessly. Am I afraid of others? For the past 1,800 years, I had no idea that such a thing had happened outside. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. You all should stop chirping here. For Qin Yu to be able to create such a scene in the Black Dragon Pool. At the very least, ordinary low-level heavenly deities would not be a match for him. If he didn't have any tricks up his sleeve, how could he possibly dare to do such a thing? Just wait and see. That Qin Yu doesn't come out. But once he does, there will be a big show. Fatty Chu shook his head and said. Then he stood up. Alright everyone, you can continue talking here. This brother of yours will go to the loft to rest first. Fatty Chu cupped his hands towards the crowd. Xishuang, let's go and rest together. Fatty Chu said to Qin Yu beside him, and then pulled Qin Yu to leave the guest hall. Qin Yu very naturally moved his hand and avoided Fatty Chu's pull. Qin Yu stood up. With a light smile he said, Fatty Chu, let's go together. There weren't many earth-numbered lofts left. When Qin Yu and Chu Luqing went to check in, it just so happened that there were only 2 buildings left. This caused Chu Luqing to rejoice endlessly. The maids of the human-numbered lofts and the maids of the earth-numbered lofts are simply 2 different levels. Xishuang, I'll stay in this building, you stay in that building. Let's meet again tomorrow. As Fatty Chu said those words, he began to walk toward the loft. Flowers were scattered all over the place. Streams were gurgling. There were several lofts in the peach forest. Qin Yu saw Fatty Chu walking out of the loft and hearing the sounds of women playing. Maids. It seems that they're like the brothels of the mortal realm. Merely the taste is much higher. All of the women are nation-toppling beauties. Qin Yu thought in his heart. Then he began to walk toward his own loft. After reaching the true God realm, one's appearance could be changed. Therefore, in the Lianfang building, even the maids of the human-numbered lofts were far more beautiful than the nation beauties of the mortal realm. At the same time, some of these people came from different universes. Different environments and different encounters created a different temperament for each of them. The dark curtain of night fell. At this moment, only the dim light of the big red lanterns on both sides of the loft's door shone. Walking on the cobblestone path, one could see the reflection of the light of the lanterns on the water surface of the peach forest. The fragrance of peach blossoms and the light was blurred. In such an environment, Qin Yu saw 2 beautiful maids with skin as tender as a baby. The 2 maids walked out of the loft's door, one on the left and one on the right. They bowed gently and said, Greetings, sir. Their voices were like that of a kitten. Hearing them made one feel comfortable. No wonder Fatty Chu and his group often come here. Qin Yu smiled slightly. Then he walked into the loft. Under the service of the 2 maids, he cleaned himself up. The light in the room was hazy. Qin Yu looked at the 2 maids in front of him and said with a smile, Well, the 2 of you must be tired. Go and rest. Without my permission, don't disturb me. Qin Yu had to admit that after the training of the Lianfang building, the maids of the earth-numbered lofts were indeed beautiful. Ordinary people would not be able to resist their charm. Yes, sir, said the 2 maids softly with disappointment. They then took a glance at Qin Yu and left the room with light steps. As for Qin Yu himself, he was lying on the bed. It's been a long time since I slept like this. Qin Yu had to admit that being served by the 2 maids made him feel lazy and comfortable. Qin Yu gently closed his eyes. After a night, the dark curtain of night left and the light of day arrived. It's been a long time since I felt this comfortable. Qin Yu felt a sense of security in his heart. Ever since he started training, it had been a long time since he had slept like this. The door to the room opened. The 2 maids were already dressed and standing outside Qin Yu's door. With a gentle voice they said, My lord, please wash yourself. There's no need for that. You 2 go and rest. I still have important matters to attend to. Indeed, Qin Yu had matters to attend to. Thus, the 2 maids could only allow Qin Yu to leave. Qin Yu had already decided in his heart. Since this news has spread through the entire divine realm and caused so many heavenly deities to come and find trouble with me, I cannot continue to hide like this. Since they want to find trouble with me, I will accept their challenge. When Qin Yu walked out of the Lianfang building, he actually saw Wu Gang and Wu Lu in front of him. Wu Gang and Wu Lu had only just arrived at Yuqi City yesterday. Thus, The two brothers decided to first investigate Qin Yu's whereabouts. If they were unable to find him, then they would slowly wait. Big brother, where are we going to find that Qin Yu? Wu Lu asked in confusion. Wu Gang had already thought about this question. He smiled and said, Second brother, according to my estimations, that Qin Yu is either hiding in the region of Mount Bewitch Yu or has already left the territory of Yuqi City. Oh! Wu Lu was a bit confused by his big brother's estimation. Wu Gang had a confident expression on his face. If he dares to face the killing intent of numerous heavenly deities, then he would not run away, and would naturally stay in the vicinity of his lair. If he is afraid, then after 1,000 years, he would have already left the territory of Yuqi City. Wu Lu nodded. Second brother, you must be careful when going to kill Qin Yu this time around. Although we brothers are both peak low-level heavenly deities, and have never lost to a low-level heavenly deity before, this Qin Yu possesses a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. We cannot be careless. Wu Gang had a serious expression. Big brother, please rest assured. I know that. Wu Lu's expression also became serious. After that, Wu Lu and Wu Gang left Yuqi City, and proceeded toward the region of Mount Bewitch Yu that Qin Yu had gone to. When Wu Lu and Wu Gang were still on their way, Qin Yu had already arrived at the region of Mount Bewitch Yu. In the desolate wilderness, Qin Yu was naturally willing to wantonly use his teleportation techniques. After over 1,800 years, flowers, plants and trees had already grown on the desolate mountain that had been burned into a complete mess. However, the great fire from back then had also caused the structure of Mount Bewitch Yu to change a bit. It had even turned into an enormous waterfall. Back then, Mount Bewitch Yu was destroyed. Today, I shall once again occupy this Mount Bewitch Yu and welcome the guests from all over. I reckon that this group of guests will soon arrive. Qin Yu had a slight smile on his face. Stepping on the void, he directly flew to a heavenly lake on top of Mount Bewitch Yu. This heavenly lake was also formed after the great change of Mount Bewitch Yu. Qin Yu constructed a wooden house beside this heavenly lake. If you want to fight against me, it will not be that easy. You'll have to pass through my formation arrays first. Qin Yu stood on top of a tall tree beside the heavenly lake. He looked all around him, and had a light smile on his face. Ordinary low-level heavenly deities, using formation arrays would be enough to deal with them. Only the experts would require me to personally take action. I am now capable of setting up level 4 formation arrays. Even if it were mid-level heavenly deities, a level 4 formation array would be able to trap them for a short period of time. Qin Yu immediately sat cross-legged on top of the tree, and began to set up a great formation array. At the moment when Qin Yu had just set up an enormous level 3 formation array, the trapping formation array, at the outermost region of Mount Bewitch Yu, and had just begun to set up another great formation array, the Wu clan brothers had arrived. Master, they've arrived. Uncle Fu said respectfully. Uncle Fu's one aura amplification formation possessed a detection ability that even ordinary heavenly deities were inferior to. This one aura amplification formation was a level 7 formation array created by the craftsman god Cheho Yuan. It was extremely miraculous. They've come. Qin Yu opened his eyes. Well then, this shall be the first battle between me, Qin Yu, and those heavenly deities. Although the opponents of this first battle are only 2 low-level heavenly deities, I'll still give them a bit of face. I'll personally fight them. Qin Yu's figure floated down like the wind. When Wu Gang and Wu Lu saw Mount Bewitch Yu from afar, they immediately sensed that this Mount Bewitch Yu was emitting a surging energy aura. That aura immediately alerted the two of them. Could it be that Qin Yu is in Mount Bewitch Yu? Wu Lu had an expression of disbelief. For over 1,000 years, no one had been able to find Qin Yu. Wu Lu and Wu Gang had originally thought that Qin Yu was hiding in one of the mountains surrounding Mount Bewitch Yu. Who would have thought that this Mount Bewitch Yu actually possessed such an energy aura? Second brother, be careful. Wu Gang had a joyous expression on his face. Upon recalling the legendary treasure of Qin Yu, the two of them couldn't help but shiver in their hearts. As they approached Mount Bewitch Yu, Wu Gang suddenly discovered that the scenery before them had changed. It was originally a mountain forest. However, it had now turned into a desolate desert. Big brother. Wu Lu's voice seemed to be slightly nervous. We've entered an illusion formation. It seems that it really is Qinyu. Don't worry about the illusion formation. Don't move for the time being. The air surrounding Wu Gang started to distort. After that, it began to spread. By controlling the change in space, one could easily return the surroundings to its normal state. The desolate desert in their surroundings also disappeared. Wu Lu also appeared beside Wu Gang. Second brother. The two of us shouldn't be too far away from each other. Follow behind me and proceed forward. Originally, I was not certain. However, now that I've seen this great formation, I am certain that Qinyu is here. Wu Gang's gloomy eyes started to shine. Wu Lu also nodded. Haha, welcome to Mount Bewitch You too. As Qinyu's first guests, I will personally welcome the two of you. A clear and bright voice sounded. Amen. Wu Gang and Wu Lu's expressions both changed. In almost an instant, the two of them had their backs against each other and were on guard. Low-level heavenly deities did not possess a strong enough control over space. Thus, the range of their spatial distortions was not large. Right when the Wu clan brothers were on guard, bang! A scarlet sword silhouette suddenly appeared over 10 meters away. The appearance of the sword silhouette was too sudden. Furthermore, its speed was extremely fast. By the time the two brothers discovered it, they only had enough time to take out the two curved blades in their hands to block it. In an instant, the scarlet sword silhouette sliced the two curved blades in half. A low-level heavenly divine artifact was simply unable to block a high-level heavenly divine artifact that possessed the special effect of sharpness. Poochie, they were sliced in half. Wu Lu and Wu Gang were instantly sliced in half. Come out! Wu Gang roared. Wu Lu also had an expression of anger. At the same time, he began to instigate the Jade Blood Gene Dan to once again form a new body. The brilliant scarlet sword silhouette once again filled the entire field of vision. Wu Gang and Wu Lu were completely powerless to resist. Merely, the sword silhouettes were all sliced horizontally. They continuously slapped the two of them several hundred times, causing the two of them to vomit blood non-stop. Even their souls were trembling. At the same time, a black-clothed youth appeared. Qinyu had finally appeared. Merely at this moment, Wu Gang and Wu Lu did not have the slightest ability to resist. Qinyu extended his left hand. A stone pagoda appeared in his palm. The stone pagoda flew out. Following the wind, the stone pagoda grew larger and larger. Before the sole attack of the god-sealing pagoda, the two of them who were already seriously injured felt a burst of drowsiness. After Qinyu appeared, the first sentence he spoke to the two brothers was, "Withdraw." Chapter 540. Wu Gang and Wu Lu, who were already seriously injured, had received the soul attack from the Grand Mist spiritual treasure God-Sealing Pagoda. They were already in a muddle-headed state. Faced with the suction power of the God-Sealing Pagoda, they simply did not have the strength to resist. Just like that, the two of them were sucked into the God-Sealing Pagoda. Right after they entered the God-Sealing Pagoda, Wu Gang and Wu Lu had already woken up. At the same time, the two of them also sensed the restriction on their souls from the God-Sealing Pagoda. They knew that they had become Qinyu's servants. Big brother. Wu Lu looked to his big brother. Generally, it would be Wu Gang who made all the decisions for the two brothers. However, at this moment, Wu Gang could only smile bitterly. Wu Gang sighed and said, "Our original plan was to follow behind the other heavenly deities and seize the opportunity to obtain one or two treasures. We can only blame ourselves for discovering Qin, discovering Master here, and being greedy for all of Master's treasures. We ended up in this state. The restriction on one's soul was extremely serious. Even God King level experts were incapable of removing it. Only the legendary exalted celestials were capable of removing it." The two brothers could only smile bitterly and urge Jade Blood Gene Dan to heal their bodies. After a short period of time, Wu Gang and Wu Lu felt that they were unable to control themselves. The two of them had already exited the God-Sealing Pagoda and arrived beside the heavenly lake on Mount Bewitch You. Seeing the black-gowned youth before them, Wu Gang and Wu Lu clearly sensed the connection between their souls. Immediately, they said respectfully, "Wu Gang, Wu Lu, pays our respects to Master." Qin Yu looked to the two low-level heavenly deities before him. Uncle Fu say, "With all those heavenly deities coveting the treasures on me and vainly attempting to kill me and seize my treasures, shouldn't I seize this opportunity to take in some servants?" Qin Yu had a smiling expression in his eyes. He had too few subordinates. In the future, he couldn't always be the one to handle matters. Thus, taking in some heavenly deities as subordinates would be pretty good. Back then, Old Master wholeheartedly pursued the path of artifact crafting. That's why he didn't take in any servants. For Old Master to leave behind the God-sealing pagoda for Master, this old servant believes that it ought to be so that Master could take in some servants. Uncle Fu said respectfully. Qin Yu nodded. He turned his head to look at the respectful Wu Gang and Wu Lu. "Wu Gang, Wu Lu, from today onwards, you are Qin Yu's servants. Normally, I will not ask you to do anything. You just need to focus on your cultivation. If you need divine spiritual stones, you only need to tell Uncle Fu. Remember, treat Uncle Fu the same way you treat me." Qin Yu's voice contained a trace of dignity. Wu Gang and Wu Lu immediately bowed. "Yes, Master." "Uncle Fu." Wu Gang and Wu Lu bowed respectfully to Uncle Fu. Uncle Fu nodded with a smile on his face. For two low-level heavenly deities to be so respectful toward him, this could be considered nothing. Back when he was beside Cheho Yuan, even the high-level heavenly deities had to treat him courteously. Otherwise, those high-level heavenly deities would not even be able to enter the entrance of the bewitching God Temple. "Wu Gang, Wu Lu, I'll send the two of you to the Jianglan's realm now. Remember, in the Jianglan's realm, behave yourselves," Qin Yu said coldly. He then waved his sleeve and Wu Gang and Wu Lu disappeared in shock. Jianglan's realm's second layer space. Jianglan's realm? Wu Gang and Wu Lu glanced at each other. They then looked to the boundless mountain rocks surrounding them, as well as the weak restriction the Jianglan's realm had on them. "It's a spatial divine artifact. We are actually unable to see the end of this space. In here, the restriction on us is very weak. Our divine awareness is able to cover hundreds of millions of miles. However, we are still unable to see the end of this space. This spatial divine artifact is no ordinary spatial divine artifact." Wu Gang also had a surprised expression. Spatial divine artifacts were extremely rare in the divine realm. One merely needed to know that even the craftsman god Cheho Yuan was unwilling to forge spatial divine artifacts to be able to guess that. Generally, those who forged spatial divine artifacts were mostly god kings. There were only that many god kings. As for those who were willing to forge spatial divine artifacts, there were even fewer. One could tell from the number of spatial divine artifacts one possessed. "Big brother, this master of ours is even more powerful than we anticipated. With this spatial divine artifact, as long as master encounters danger, he would be able to directly hide in this spatial divine artifact. Who would be able to catch him? To break through a spatial divine artifact, even high-level heavenly deities would find it very difficult." Wu Lu sighed and said. Wu Gang shook his head. He started to frown. "No, high-level heavenly deities are capable of destroying a portion of space. Once Master hides in the spatial divine artifact, the main body of the spatial divine artifact would still be in the outside world. Even if that high-level heavenly deity is unable to destroy the spatial divine artifact, it is still possible for them to tear open a spatial crack and bring the spatial divine artifact into the spatial crack." When Wu Lu thought of this, he was also stunned. "I hope that Master does not encounter a high-level heavenly deity. Otherwise, we would also be out of luck," Wu Gang said helplessly. Wu Gang and Wu Lu's experience was lacking. Ordinary spatial divine artifacts might be trapped by the spatial cracks of the divine realm. However, the Jianglan's realm was different. As a grand mist spiritual treasure, no matter how strong the devouring power of the spatial cracks of the divine realm was, it would still not be able to move it in the slightest. Furthermore, the Jianglan's realm was located in the universal world. Other than Qin Yu, there was simply no one else capable of finding the Jianglan's realm. On Mount Biwichu, Qinyu was sitting cross-legged on top of a large tree beside the heavenly lake. His hands were forming hand seals one after another. One by one, the formation arrays that he had deduced and created were being set up. Qinyu had been sitting like this for an entire half a year now. In this half a year, Qinyu had set up several hundred formation arrays. These several hundred formation arrays were set up densely in the surroundings of Mount Biwichu, as well as the mountainside of Mount Biwichu. Regardless of who it was, regardless of which direction they attacked from, they would all be attacked by the formation arrays. And now, Qinyu was wholeheartedly setting up level 4 formation arrays. Those several hundred formation arrays that were densely packed together were all level 3 formation arrays. To the current Qinyu, setting up several hundred level 3 formation arrays was not difficult at all. However, level 4 formation arrays were extremely difficult to set up. Ah, motherfucker, let your daddy out. Within a certain illusion array in the outer region of Mount Biwichu, a short and robust man angrily shouted. He was a small fry of the Black Dragon Pool. He had received an order to go out and handle some matters. As he passed by Mount Biwichu, he accidentally fell into this illusion array. Boom! Within a level 3 great slaughtering formation array, white pure flames would occasionally appear. There were already several people that had died here. That short and robust man that had fallen into the illusion array was actually a lot luckier than the people that had fallen into the great slaughtering formation array. Big sister, be careful. Inside the trapping formation array, 2 women were carefully walking hand in hand. The 2 of them were also low-level members of the Black Dragon Pool. The 2 of them were very lucky and had stepped into a trapping formation array that did not possess any destructive power. In half a year's time, the 2 heavenly deities of the Black Dragon Pool, Taoist Lu Su and Meiji, had already noticed Mount Biwichu. The various kinds of formation arrays that had appeared on Mount Biwichu caused the 2 of them to have a premonition that Qinyu had returned, having fought against Qinyu before, especially knowing that even the 9-headed Black Dragon had been defeated by Qinyu. How could the 2 of them possibly dare to go and create trouble for Qinyu? The 2 of them merely passed this information to Tanjio. Inside the Yuchi city, inside the earth-numbered pavilion of the pity-fragrant building, a woman and 3 men were gathered together. These 4 heavenly deities were from the number 1 bandit power of the Ozi city, one of the 64 cities in the eastern region of the Divine Realm. This woman was called Qi Hongfeng. She was the leader of these 4 people. Her strength had also reached the mid-level heavenly deity level. The 3 men under her were all low-level heavenly deities. Big sister, we have just received news from the outside. Qinyu has reappeared. He is currently at the former Mount Biwichu, said one of the men in a slightly excited manner. Qi Hongfeng was extremely tall. She swept her phoenix eyes and said with a frown, "You said that Qinyu has appeared at Mount Biwichu? How could this Qinyu be this daring to return to Mount Biwichu? Are you certain of this news?" "I am absolutely certain. This news was obtained from a disciple of the Black Dragon Pool. Many people from the Black Dragon Pool have already fallen into the great formation array of Mount Biwichu. There are very few formation array experts in the Divine Realm to begin with. I reckon that no one would be so bored as to disguise themselves as Qinyu, and especially go to Mount Biwichu to set up a great formation array," said that man promptly. Among the 3 men, the shortest youth spoke. "Big sister, I feel that what the 3rd brother said is very possible. That Qinyu did not escape from Yuchi City. Since he dared to stay behind, it is very possible that he has appeared at Mount Biwichu." Qi Hongfeng muttered to herself for a moment. Then she stood up and said, "Very well, let's set off immediately." "Yes, big sister." The 3 men all stood up and said. Traces of excitement could be seen on their faces. It was not only them. This news had spread throughout the entire Yuchi city. Qinyu, this fragrant cake, had returned. The heavenly deities that received the news all began to move. Although the heavenly deities received the news one after the other, at the very most, there was only a difference of several days. There were truly a lot of greedy heavenly deities in the entire Divine Realm. In merely the eastern region of the Divine Realm, close to 100 heavenly deities had gathered in Yuchi City. There were also some heavenly deities from other regions of the divine realm. In total, there were close to 200 heavenly deities. The first group of heavenly deities that received the news had already begun to set off toward Mount Bewitchu. Inside an ordinary house in Yuchi City, a person was currently sitting cross-legged. That person had a head of short scarlet hair that stood up like steel needles. That person had a dark and skinny body. He was the nine-headed black dragon Tangio. Back then, when he fought against Qinyu in the Black Dragon Pool, Tangio felt a trace of fear toward Qinyu. Spear? What sort of spear is that? Tangio was forever unable to forget Qinyu's black-colored spear that had a bit of dark yellow specks on it. Faced with that spear and Qinyu's teleportation technique, Tangio was simply powerless to resist. Qinyu, I had thought that you had fled back to your master's place. Humph! Never would I have expected for you to be this daring. A trace of fierceness appeared in Tangio's eyes. With this many heavenly deities gathered here, I do not believe that you will be able to kill all of them. Tangio recalled those heavenly deities that had rushed over to kill Mount Bewitchu and displayed a grim smile. Go ahead, go ahead. Qinyu does not only possess a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. When you all discover that spear of his, you will not be able to escape anymore. Tangio was able to foresee that with this many heavenly deities, many of them would definitely be killed by Qinyu. However, Tangio also believed that in the end, Qinyu would definitely be outnumbered. I shall be the final Oriole. Tangio stood up. Back then, he had lost 8 of his 9 great clones. However, after over 1,800 years of recovery, he had already recovered 90% of his strength. After all, as a 9-beast black dragon, as long as a single soul remained alive, the other souls would still be able to recover. The news of Qinyu's appearance had reached the hands of the Yuchi City's city master, Yuchi Gonglan, in an extremely short period of time. At the same time, it had also reached the hands of the utmost eastern region's Mount Dazzling Gold, Huangjing. As for the utmost northern region's Floating Snow City, Jianglan and Li Heir of the Wood Mansion had also received this news. The gazes of many people from the divine realm were gathered here. Some people had the mood of watching a show. Some people were paying close attention to it. After all, in peacetime, it was extremely rare for 100 heavenly deities to fight each other. In the outer region of Mount Bewitchu stood 8 heavenly deities. At this moment, another 12 heavenly deities were flying over from behind them. Among these 20 heavenly deities, there were 18 low-level heavenly deities and 2 mid-level heavenly deities. This group of heavenly deities were the first to obtain the news and the first to rush over. Friends, do not be anxious. At this moment, there are different formation arrays all over Mount Bewitchu. If you were to rashly enter them, then at the very least, the low-level heavenly deities would definitely die. A clear and bright voice sounded. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man with a goatee. He was also one of the 2 mid-level heavenly deities among the 20 heavenly deities. So it's actually old brother Xinyu. Qi Hongfeng flew over. Qi Hongfeng's red battle armor was completely close-fitting to her body, outlining her devilish figure. With old brother Xinyu here, this matter will be easy to handle. I know old brother Xinyu's attainments in formation arrays very well, Qi Hongfeng said with a smile. However, the heavenly deities here came from all over the place. Not all of them were convinced by that Xinyu Yang. Xinyu Yang coldly smiled. You all watch. Several hundred divine spiritual stones were floating above Xinyu Yang's palm. Numerous talismans were floating above these several hundred divine spiritual stones. Soon after, the several hundred divine spiritual stones flew toward all directions of Mount Bewitchu like sharp arrows. When the several hundred divine spiritual stones entered the great formation array, only to see, Chi-Chi, in a certain corner of Mount Bewitchu's formation array, lightning was flickering. Countless electric snakes were roaming about. Boom! A great formation array in the outer region of Mount Bewitchu was suddenly filled with a large amount of white pure flames. This caused the expressions of all the low-level heavenly deities present to change greatly. Faced with the white pure flames, low-level heavenly deities were simply unable to withstand it. flames, lightning, all kinds of energy attacks. The entire Mount Bewitch You appeared like hell. Sunken holes were present everywhere. However, there were some places that did not have any reaction at all. However, this caused one's heart to palpitate even more. The unknown was even more frightening. The 20 heavenly deities present immediately had extremely ugly expressions. Chapter 541. Qin closed his eyes and sat cross-legged on a rock. It's finally done. Qin opened his eyes and couldn't help but smile. Then, he moved to the side of the heavenly lake at the peak of the mountain. Uncle Fu was currently beside the heavenly lake. He bowed and said, "Master, at this moment, 20 heavenly deities have already gathered at the foot of Mount Bewitch You. They seem to be having a discussion right now. I reckon they're discussing how to break the formation and enter this place." Qin nodded slightly. Now that they're united, it's still a little troublesome for me to deal with them. It's time to use some tricks. Qin suddenly flew into the sky. He flew high above Mount Bewitch You. The 20 heavenly deities below Mount Bewitch You were all able to clearly see him. "Is that black-clothed you, Qin?" A low-level heavenly deity woman asked in confusion. How could the 20 heavenly deities, including Xin Yang and Qi Hongfeng, continue to discuss matters? All of them looked at Qin, who was in the distant sky. Qi Hongfeng flew forward. She then loudly said, "I am a mid-level heavenly deity Qi Hongfeng. Qin you, a mere low-level heavenly deity, ought to know about the disparity between us. Even if you are able to hide temporarily, by relying on the formation array, in the end, you will still fall into our hands. As long as you hand over the treasure with both hands, I, Qi Hongfeng, dare to swear to the heavens that I will not kill you." "Hand it over with both hands?" Qin voice was cold. "Is there such a good thing? I, Qin, am indeed only a low-level heavenly deity. However, do you all have the ability to kill me?" At this moment, the 20 Empyrean gods had already begun conversing via divine sense. "Big brother, this Qin is in the air right now. He's not on the mountain, and there's no formation in the air. As long as we're fast enough, and seize the opportunity, we might be able to kill that Qin. That Xin Yang and Qi Hongfeng are both mid-level heavenly deities. If we follow behind them, we will definitely not be able to obtain any treasures in the end. Thus, we should go and capture Qin with our fastest speed." Right now, quite a few heavenly deities were tempted. After all, once Qin hid in the array, they would not be able to see him. If they wanted to kill Qin, they would have to break the arrays one by one. And Qin was in the air, so there was a chance. "Everyone, do not act rashly and alert the enemy," Xin Yuqing shouted through his divine sense. Xin Yang was naturally able to guess what the people present were thinking. However, would these low-level heavenly deities listen to Xin Yang? Right at the moment when Xin Yang turned around to look at Qin, 6 low-level heavenly deities instantly entered the ground. The ground was made of soil. With the strength of a low-level heavenly deity, it was not hard for them to travel underground. These 6 people were all rushing toward the side of Mount Bewitch You from underground. They were all rushing toward the corners that Qin couldn't see. They were rushing with extreme speed to kill Qin in one move. A bunch of bastards. Xin Yang immediately discovered that 6 of his low-level heavenly deities had disappeared. Thus his face was filled with anger. This bunch of bastards, they truly do not know how to write the word death. Qi Hongfeng, however, remained silent. She only looked at Xin Yang with a smile. This time, they still had to rely on Xin Yang, this formation expert, to capture Qin. Although he was said to be a formation expert, he could only be considered a formation expert among a group of bandits. After all, generally, in order to become a formation expert, one would need to learn formation scrolls. Without a certain background, one would simply not be able to learn the Divine Realm's formation techniques. True array masters were either super experts themselves, or because they had a powerful sect, or were born in a big family. As for bandits, it was truly hard to find a formation expert that could stand shoulder to shoulder with Qin. "Old brother Xin, how certain are you that you can break through the formation?" Qi Hongfeng asked with a smile. When Xin Yang was testing the might of the formation earlier, he already had an idea. Immediately, he lightly smiled and said, "As long as everyone listens to me, I have absolute certainty. Merely, it might take a bit longer to break through the formation." Although Xin Yang did not have a good formation expert to teach him, he had managed to barely reach the peak of level 3 formation techniques. By relying on the remnant scrolls of formation scrolls he had obtained, and after 10 billion years of research, Xin Yang's aptitude was not high, and he also did not have an expert to teach him. Merely, he had spent a lot of time in order to obtain his current level of accomplishment. However, the majority of the formations set up by Qin Yu were level 3 formations. Only the 3 most central formations were level 4 formations. Xin Yang was still capable of breaking through level 3 formations. "Alright, then we'll follow behind old brother Xin Yu." Qi Hongfeng suddenly stopped speaking halfway and looked toward Qin Yu, who was in the sky. That was because she had also seen 2 people rushing toward Qin Yu rapidly from behind Qin Yu. It was as if Qin Yu did not notice them. "If you have the ability, then come and catch me," Qin Yu said to the direction of Qi Hongfeng and Xin Yang. After that he started to descend. The 2 people who were rushing over from behind could not help but be startled. "Unlucky. Consider this Qin Yu lucky. Humph, he's inside that great formation. Chase after him." The leader of the 2 said via divine awareness voice transmission. Even now, the 2 of them were still thinking that Qin Yu did not notice them, and that he was merely lucky. And at this moment, there were also 4 people rapidly chasing after Qin Yu from different directions. A total of 6 people. All of them were chasing after Qin Yu. At the moment when Qin Yu descended onto the surface of the great formation below, his figure suddenly stopped. He raised his head and looked toward the sky. He just so happened to see the 6 people rapidly flying toward him. Qin Yu displayed a brilliant smile to the 6 of them. The 6 of them were unable to help themselves from stopping. This was a great formation set up by Qin Yu. They did not dare to recklessly charge into it. "Everyone, what should we do now?" one of the low-level heavenly deities asked. The other 5 low-level heavenly deities were all momentarily unable to make a decision. After a short moment, a golden-clothed man among them said, "If we follow that Xin Yang, wouldn't we still have to charge into that formation? We'll charge into that formation. It's merely a formation. The possibility of it killing the 6 of us is very low. Let's join hands and kill Qin Yu first." "No, what if it's a formation that uses white pure flames to attack?" a white-clothed woman said with a frown. At this moment, Qin Yu, who was standing on the surface of the formation, naturally knew what these people were worried about. "This is merely an illusion formation. I'll give you all the opportunity to catch me," Qin Yu said with a light smile. Soon after, he entered into the illusion formation. Hearing that it was an illusion formation, the 6 of them took a glance at each other, and then rapidly rushed toward the surface of the great formation. After that, one of them attempted to enter the formation and control the space to distort it. "It's an illusion formation," that man said to the other 5 in a clear voice. The 5 of them were overjoyed and immediately rushed into the formation. Qin Yu did not deceive them. This place was indeed an illusion formation. After the 6 of them entered the great formation, they immediately controlled the divine realm's spatial energy to disperse the surrounding environment. As the 6 of them were relatively close to each other, the area that the 6 of them dispersed was truly quite large. "Where is that Qin Yu? I can't see him at all." The 6 of them started to become anxious. Suddenly, "Over there." That white-clothed woman took the lead and rushed forward. The other 5 immediately followed behind her. However, when the 6 of them rushed forward, they entered into a great formation beside the illusion formation, a trapping formation. While an illusion formation was easy to break, a trapping formation was extremely difficult. Crap! The 6 of them all felt that the situation was bad. Back then, when Qin Yu faced Xionghe had broken through several of his formations with brute force. It was also from that time that Qin Yu learned the importance of setting up a small-scale defensive formation around the foundation of the formation. No matter how frantically these 6 people attacked the trapping formation, they were unable to take a single step out of the trapping formation. The trapping formation contained illusions, material objects, attacks, and so on. After the 6 of them entered the trapping formation, they were unable to find each other and scattered. A low-level heavenly deity was cautiously walking. His forehead was dripping with cold sweat. PFFF. A scarlet sword silhouette suddenly appeared from the wall beside him. In an instant, it pierced through the throat of a low-level heavenly deity. At the same time, a strand of energy was shot toward Jade Blood Jean Dan. Jade Blood Jean Dan was startled. Fortunately, Qin Yu was lenient. Otherwise, this low-level heavenly deity's Jade Blood Jean Dan would have been shattered. Qin Yu suddenly appeared beside him. He held the God-sealing pagoda with a single hand. The God-sealing pagoda unleashed a soul attack. In reality, the God-sealing pagoda only possessed a single type of attack, soul attack. As for absorbing, it could not be considered an attack at all. The seriously injured low-level heavenly deity was easily absorbed into the God-sealing pagoda. Next, Qin Yu lightly smiled. With a movement of his body he disappeared. This great formation was something that Qin Yu had set up himself. Thus, entering and leaving the great formation was incomparably easy. Furthermore, Qin Yu was also capable of teleportation. In a short period of time, the 6 low-level heavenly deities were all sucked into the God-sealing pagoda by Qin Yu. Soon after, Qin Yu once again flew into the sky. He still had a smile on his face as he looked to Xin Yu Yang and them. With a clear voice he said, "I'll give you all another chance to take care of me. Next time, I'll be hiding within the great formation." Not a single one of those 14 heavenly deities dared to move. Although they did not see the ending of the 6 heavenly deities, they were able to imagine what would happen to them. "Everyone follow me. Watch as I break through his formation," said Xin Yu Yang in a clear voice. With the support of Qi Hongfeng, 2 mid-level heavenly deities and 12 low-level heavenly deities moved together. The 14 heavenly deities were flying in the sky. Xin Yu Yang sneered as he looked to Qin Yu. "Qin Yu, if you have the ability, then stay within a formation and compete with me in formation techniques. Do you dare?" Formation techniques? Qin Yu, who was in the sky, was startled. Formation techniques did not represent one's strength. Especially the so-called first level of formation techniques. There were differences between everyone. With a smile on his face, Qin Yu said, "What is your formation techniques level?" "I have already comprehended the first level of formation techniques. Although it cannot be considered high in the divine realm, it is more than enough to break through your formation techniques." "What about you? What level have you reached?" asked Xin Yu Yang. "I haven't even reached the first level," Qin Yu said honestly. Xin Yu Yang was startled. Xin Yu Yang did not dare to believe that Qin Yu did not even have a formation techniques level. After all, when he had just comprehended the first level of formation techniques, it was simply impossible for him to set up these formation techniques. And now, he had already walked on the path of the first level of formation techniques for a very long time. His strength had increased by a lot. "However, my formation techniques, are you able to break through them?" Qin Yu lightly laughed. Like Lu Xing, he entered a formation technique. Xin Yu Yang swept his gaze around. He then shouted to the crowd behind him, "Everyone listen carefully. No matter what, you all must stay within my and Miss Chi's spatial domain. Only by doing this would I be able to protect you all." Spatial domain, a mid-level heavenly deity's spatial domain. Once they entered someone else's spatial domain, wouldn't they be at their mercy? Qi Hongfeng's side had 4 people, Xin Yu Yang's side had 5 people, and the other 5 people came from different places. These 5 Empyrean deities looked at each other. In the end they could only endure. The 20 Empyrean deities were all within Xin Yu Yang and Qi Hongfeng's spatial domain. The spatial domain could only guarantee their safety within the range of the spatial domain. "Spatial domain?" Qin Yu sneered. With a clear voice he said, "All of you listen carefully. With the spatial domain, it is indeed easy to break through that sort of formation array." "Good, in that case, I'll stay in this great formation array. As long as you all break through this great formation array, I will no longer escape." At this moment, Qin Yu had already arrived within the only trapping formation among the 3 level 4 formations. Qin Yu did not want to lead them into the level 4 killing formation, because Qin Yu wanted to take this group of people in. When Xin Yu Yang saw the formation that Qin Yu was in, his heart couldn't help but tighten. This formation is very complicated. However, he recalled that he had already comprehended the first level of formation techniques, while Qin Yu had not. I don't believe that I can't break it. With Xin Yu Yang as the leader, a total of 14 people directly flew into the level 4 trapping formation from the sky. Once they entered the level 4 trapping formation, Xin Yu Yang felt a headache. Old brother Xin Yu, how long will it take to break it? Qi Hongfeng asked anxiously. Once she entered the formation, she felt that something was wrong. This trapping formation contained all kinds of attacks. Furthermore, there were also material objects. Its defense was also extremely astonishing. She had maintained the spatial domain for a long time, which consumed a lot of energy. Don't be anxious. It will take some time. It will take some time. Xin Yu Yang continued to observe and test the reaction of the formation. Cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. He was already somewhat panicked. Just by looking at Xin Yu Yang's actions in this short period of time, Qin Yu determined that this Xin Yu Yang definitely did not have the strength of a level 4 formation. Arrogant fellow. At this moment, Qin Yu was already flying in the sky. If he had the strength of a level 5 formation, he probably wouldn't need to break the formation and would be able to come and go freely in the formation. Furthermore, even if he had the strength of a level 4 formation technique, it would not be that easy for him to break my trapping formation. He simply did not care about Xin Yu Yang and this group of people. Qin Yu planned to capture them one by one after a while. When this group of people had been tortured to a certain degree by the level 4 trapping formation, Qin Yu suddenly saw that in the distant sky, quite a few deities were flying towards the direction of Mount Biwichu. Oh, more deities have come. I wonder how many deities there are. However, no matter. My God-sealing pagoda will devour as many as they come. Qin Yu smiled faintly as he stood in the midair of Mount Biwichu. Chapter 542. Qin Yu stood in the air. With a single glance, he had already determined the number of heavenly deities before him. There were not a lot of heavenly deities, there were only 9 of them. The person in the lead possessed a lion-like beard and hair. However, his hair was fiery red in color. His eyes were also crimson red. His aura was extremely tyrannical. This man was precisely Lan Shanhua. He was the leader of the bandit powers in one of the 64 cities in the eastern region of the Divine Realm, Yuanling City. Lord Lanshan, Mount Biwichu is ahead of us. A low-level heavenly deity said respectfully. Lanshanhua's fierce gaze swept through the entire Mount Biwichu. After that, his gaze was completely focused on Qin Yu, who was standing in the air. He immediately roared. Are you Qin Yu? Qin Yu was unable to refrain himself from smiling. This domineering man before him was truly straightforward. Precisely. Which heavenly deity are you? Tell me your name. Qin Yu said with a clear voice. Lan Shanhua took a deep breath. The muscles on his chest bulged out. Only then did Lan Shanhua say proudly, I am Yuanling City's fire lion Lan Shanhua. I presume you also know of my strength. The gap between the two of us is extremely large. It's best that you obediently hand over the treasures. If you don't. Lan Shanhua suddenly stopped speaking. That was because a low-level heavenly deity under his command said to him, via divine awareness voice transmission. Lord Lanshan, according to our intelligence, that bitch Qi Hongfeng came here before us. However, she is now gone. I reckon that she has fallen into the hands of this Qin Yu. Lord Lanshan, you must be careful. Due to the fact that the majority of the people that had rushed over to Yuchi City to chase, after Qin Yu had stayed in Yuchi City for a period of time, they were relatively familiar with each other. Thus, this Lan Shanhua knew that Qi Hongfeng had set off before them. Lan Shanhua's crimson red eyes suddenly narrowed. Only a small crack could be seen. A ruby-like radiance leaked out from his eyes. That bitch Qi Hongfeng has also fallen? Lan Shanhua immediately increased Qin Yu's status in his heart by a large amount. That bitch Chi Hongfeng had fought against me before. Even I was unable to do anything to her. Yet this Qin Yu. Lan Shanhua hesitated. Lan Shanhua, why are you only speaking halfway? Tell me, if I don't hand over the treasure, what can you do to me? Qin Yu was still smiling. He stood in the air, his robe fluttering in the wind. Lan Shanhua took a glance at Qin Yu's formation arrays and coldly snorted. He thought in his heart. A low-level heavenly deity. Isn't it just that his formation arrays are a bit powerful? It's hard to say if that old hag Chi Hongfeng arrived here first. She might have changed her route midway. Even if that old hag Chi Hongfeng died in the array formation, with the space domain, that Chi Hongfeng won't die so easily. Just as Lan Shanhua was pondering, boom. A violent explosion sound came from a large formation array on top of Mount Bewitchu. That large formation array was precisely the only trapping formation among Qin Yu's 3 rank 4 formation arrays. Qin Yu, you can only trap us. If you have the ability, then fight us head-on. A furious roar came from the formation. Shut up, quiet down. A shout sounded. Lan Shanhua's eyes shined. He immediately recognized that familiar voice. It's that old hag Chi Hongfeng. She is indeed trapped in that formation array. Merely, that large formation array is unable to do anything to mid-level heavenly deities. A thought immediately appeared in Lan Shanhua's mind. Immediately after, Lan Shanhua turned to the heavenly deities behind him and shouted, "Everyone, Miss Qi is currently in that large formation array and is attacking it unceasingly. Everyone, follow me to kill that Qin Yu. Even if we are to enter that large formation array, we will attack it together. If there are too many people in that large formation array, I do not believe that his formation array will be able to withstand it." "Yes, my lord," someone immediately responded loudly. Of these 8 low-level heavenly deities, 3 were Lan Shanhua's subordinates. The other 5 were merely relying on Lan Shanhua. "The 5 of you listen carefully. After entering the large formation array, hide in my space domain. If you all are worried, then stay here. Little ones, let's go." Lan Shanhua shouted loudly. He immediately took the lead and soared into the sky. The 3 low-level heavenly deities immediately followed him. The other 5 heavenly deities merely paused for a moment before flying after him. Under Lan Shanhua's space domain, the 8 low-level heavenly deities directly chased after Qin Yu. Qin Yu watched as the 9 low-level heavenly deities charged toward him. His body flew in an arc and entered into the trapping formation array. If there are too many people trapped in this trapping formation array, then if these people were to attack it unceasingly, the power of their attacks would surpass the upper limit of the large formation array and cause the formation array to collapse. However, this large formation array is still able to withstand the attacks of these people. Qin Yu was extremely clear about the situation of the trapping formation array. Inside the trapping formation array, Chi Hongfeng was frowning as she looked to Xin Yuyang beside her. Ever since they entered the large formation array, Xin Yuyang had been trying his best to study this large formation array the entire time. However, even now, Xin Yuyang was still unable to break through this large formation array. How could this be? Logically, shouldn't it be at most superposition? How did the water and fire attribute energies fuse together? How did they fuse with the alloy defensive formation array? No, this is simply impossible. Xin Yuyang was analyzing the large formation array before him non-stop. From Xin Yuyang's point of view, according to the first stage of formation arrays that he had comprehended, the essence of formation arrays, the formation array that Qin Yu had set up did not conform to the essence of formation arrays that he had comprehended. In other words, theoretically, the formation array before him should not exist at all. Of course, this theory was Xin Yuyang's own theory. Even now, Xin Yuyang still did not know that the first level of formation array that he was so proud of was simply wrong. It was extremely far from the true essence of formation array. "Old brother Xin Yu, it's been so long. Have you made any progress?" Chi Hongfeng had a somewhat gloomy expression on her face. "Don't be anxious," Xin Yuyang shouted in a low voice. He had also started to analyze anxiously. At the same time, Xin Yuyang once again used some restrictions to test the reaction of the formation array. Berserk lightning bolts struck down ruthlessly. Lightning flashed and thunder rolled. All kinds of water attribute, fire attribute, and other attribute energies were frantically attacking the formation array. Xin Yang and Qi Hongfeng were maintaining their spatial domains and blocking the attacks from the outside non-stop. Qi Hongfeng's spatial domain was composed of 6 people other than herself. As for Xin Yang's spatial domain, it was composed of 6 people other than himself. The 3 of you, get out of my spatial domain. Qi Hongfeng suddenly turned around and coldly said to the 2 low-level heavenly deities. Qi Hongfeng only had 3 direct subordinates. As for the other 3, they were all lone wolves. Qi Hongfeng had expanded the range of her spatial domain to block all kinds of attacks. As such, she had consumed a large amount of her soul's power. The expressions of those 3 low-level heavenly deities immediately changed. To have them leave the spatial domain, wasn't that the same as forcing them to die? Before the 3 of them could say anything, they felt that the spatial domain had shrunk and directly excluded the 3 of them. At the same time, all kinds of energy attacks landed on their bodies. As Xin Yang was researching the formation array, he had exhausted his spirit to begin with. At this moment, he had also shrunk the range of his spatial domain and directly excluded the 2 low-level heavenly deities that were not his direct subordinates. The 5 low-level heavenly deities looked to Xin Yang and Qi Hongfeng with resentment. After that, they had no choice but to immediately flee. The gaze that Qi Hongfeng looked to Xin Yang with was extremely vicious. "Old brother Xinyu, we've already been in here for an entire hour," said Qi Hongfeng one word at a time. Xin Yang turned around to look to Qi Hongfeng. His complexion was a bit pale, and his forehead was covered with sweat. His face was also filled with helplessness. In the end, he sighed and shook his head. "Miss Qi, please forgive me. I am truly powerless. You should think of a way yourself." The 3 low-level heavenly deities behind Qi Hongfeng immediately cursed out in anger. However, Qi Hongfeng extended her hand to stop them. Qi Hongfeng coldly took a glance at Xin Yang. After that, she led her 3 direct subordinates and began to move. Qin Yu knew very well about the situation within the trapping formation array. The heavenly deities in this great formation array were mainly separated into 4 groups. The first group was led by Qi Hongfeng and 4 others. The second group was led by Xin Yang and 5 others. The third group was led by Lan Shanhua and the other 5 low-level heavenly deities that had just arrived. Let's take care of those 5 low-level heavenly deities first. Otherwise, those 5 people will lose their lives soon. Qin Yu thought aloud. Increase the speed as quickly as possible. Use the divine spear waning snow directly. In this trapping formation array, Qin Yu was not afraid of others seeing the divine spear waning snow. Furthermore, the divine spear waning snow's spirit devouring ability and the dark and yellow energies ability to attack the soul allowed Qin Yu to easily take care of others. As time passed, Qi Hongfeng and her group of 4 continued to miserably escape from the trapping formation array. Even Qi Hongfeng's spatial domain only covered an area of 3 meters around them. "Big sister, what should we do?" one of them asked. His face was filled with anxiety. Qi Hongfeng glanced at her surroundings. At this moment, before her was a boundless swamp. Evidently, this was an illusion of the trapping formation array. The reason why trapping formations were so powerful was because they were capable of fusing with all kinds of formation arrays. I refuse to believe that Qi Hongfeng, who has moved unhindered in the divine realm for so many years, would be defeated by a mere formation array. Qi Hongfeng emitted a fierce aura. Women were not inferior to men. The 3 of you listen carefully. Even if we are unable to escape, it would still be impossible for that Qin Yu to kill us, Qi Hongfeng said confidently. We merely need to continue to wait. There are a lot of heavenly deities chasing after Qin Yu this time around. When more and more people arrive, there will definitely be someone who will be able to break through this formation array. Qi Hongfeng looked to her surroundings. Right now, I have only formed a spatial domain with a circumference of 3 meters. The consumption of this bit of soul power is comparable to the recovery speed of my soul power. There is no need to worry about my spatial domain not being able to last. Big sister, you mean to say? These three low-level heavenly deities started to understand. Chi Hafeng continued to proceed forward. She arrived at a maze formed by walls of all kinds of different colors. Only then did she directly sit down cross-legged and said indifferently, "We'll wait here. We'll wait until a large number of heavenly deities come to kill us." Although Chi Hongfeng spoke with incomparable confidence, she still felt a bit uneasy in her heart. However, she was unable to explain why she felt uneasy. Looking at her plan, there was a prerequisite. That is, Qin Yu would not be able to kill her. Was he truly unable to kill her? That Qin Yu does not possess any means to kill me, even if he possesses a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. I am a mid-level heavenly deity, and also possess a mid-quality heavenly divine artifact. Thought Chi Hongfeng in her heart. Miss Chi, it's not good to be too confident. A divine awareness voice transmission directly sounded in Chi Hongfeng's mind. Chi Hongfeng's eyes suddenly burst forth with radiance. The flexible sword in her hand immediately became taut. Chi Hafeng became alert. She carefully observed her surroundings. The three low-level heavenly deities behind her also became alert. However, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Chi Hongfeng. This sort of appearance shocked Chi Hongfeng. At the same time, Qin Yu unleashed the divine spear waning snow in his hand. Trying to kill me with a high-quality heavenly divine artifact? In your dreams, thought Chi Hongfeng in her heart. At the same time, her spatial domain abruptly expanded and covered Qin Yu within it. She was planning to use her spatial domain to bind Qin Yu and the spear in Qin Yu's hand. Thousands of hair-thin spatial cracks appeared around the tip of the divine spear waning snow. Her spatial domain was simply unable to bind it. Chi Hongfeng's expression immediately changed. At the same time, she impatiently used the flexible sword in her hand to block it. Bang! Like a whip, the flexible sword immediately coiled around the divine spear waning snow. However, a layer of dark and yellow energy appeared on the surface of the divine spear waning snow. With a tremble of the dark and yellow energy, the flexible sword was loosened. Puchi! The divine spear waning snow pierced through Chi Hongfeng's chest. At the same time, a ripple of energy directly attacked Chi Hongfeng's soul. One of the two great special effects of the divine spear waning snow, devouring soul. The effects of devouring soul were controlled by Qin Yu. Especially after absorbing the dark and yellow energy, the devouring soul and body-splitting soul became even more astonishing. Chi Hongfeng felt a burst of rumbling in her head. After that she sat down weakly. Seeing this scene, those three low-level heavenly deities felt a burst of disbelief. As for Qin Yu himself, he had teleported 3 times in succession. The divine spear waning snow struck out 3 times, and caused the 3 low-level heavenly deities to fall to the ground. Why isn't this Qin Yu killing me? Chi Hafeng was puzzled. At this moment, a small stone pagoda appeared in Qin Yu's hand before her. The stone pagoda grew with the wind. Soon after, it became as tall as a 3-story building. Absorb! Qin Yu lightly shouted. Then several soul attacks covered the 4 low-level heavenly deities that had fallen to the ground. The 4 low-level heavenly deities whose souls had already been injured allowed the God-sealing pagoda to absorb them into it. This is only the first batch. The next batch will be Xin Yu Yang and the other 4. Qin Yu retrieved the God-sealing pagoda. His figure directly disappeared. Qin Yu began to frantically attack in this level 4 trapping array. He began to wantonly absorb these heavenly deities into the God-sealing pagoda. The number of Qin Yu's servants continued to increase. They broke through 10. Gradually they broke through 20. There was no heavenly deity that could win against Qin Yu, who possessed the divine spear waning snow, and the ability to teleport. Qin Yu, who did not conceal his strength at all, was indeed astonishingly frightening. Chapter 543. From when Qin Yu attacked Chi Hongfeng to when Qin Yu stopped. In merely a short period of time, a total of 23 heavenly deities were all captured by Qin Yu at once. Adding on the 6 heavenly deity servants from before, and the Wu clan brothers, there were a total of 31 heavenly deity servants. Mount Bewitch Yu. Beside the heavenly lake, the water of the heavenly lake was as tranquil as a mirror. It reflected the sky. Occasionally, the mountain wind would blow past, creating ripples on the surface of the lake. Qin Yu stood beside the heavenly lake with his hands behind his back. His gown would occasionally flutter in the wind. With a wave of his hand, these 23 newly captured heavenly deities appeared before Qin Yu. Qi Hafeng, Xin Yu Yang and Lan Shanhe were the leaders. The other 20 heavenly deities stood behind them. When the 23 heavenly deities saw Qin Yu, they simultaneously bowed and said respectfully, "We pay our respects to Master." Once they entered the God-sealing pagoda, their souls would be restricted. Right now, they could only follow Qin Yu. Qi Hafeng, Xin Yu Yang and Lan Shanhe looked to Qin Yu with shock and reverence in their eyes. When they saw each other in the God-sealing pagoda, they all knew that each other had also been captured. They were 3 mid-level heavenly deities. When faced with a low-level heavenly deity like Qin Yu, why were they unable to resist at all? They were unable to understand. This caused their master, before them, to be even more mysterious. Qin Yu swept his gaze across the crowd. He then said, "From today on, you all are my servants. All of your matters shall be arranged by Uncle Fu." With an intention from Qin Yu, Uncle Fu appeared beside Qin Yu from the Jianglan's realm. Uncle Fu. These 23 heavenly deities were all extremely respectful and humble. Uncle Fu already knew what Qin Yu meant. Upon seeing this group of heavenly deities, he bowed to Qin Yu and said with a smile, "Never would I have expected that Master would capture 23 heavenly deities in a blink of an eye. Uncle Fu, I'll have to trouble you to manage them," Qin Yu said with a light smile. "This old servant will manage them well." Uncle Fu looked to these 23 heavenly deities and nodded slightly. With an intention from Qin Yu, Uncle Fu and the 23 heavenly deities all entered into the second layer space of the Jianglan's realm. Qin Yu's body was like a willow catkin. He floated to the top of the tree and looked into the distance. The next batch of Empyrean gods will probably take a while to arrive. Qin Yu didn't want to wait here. He directly flew into the trap array. Qin Yu sat down cross-legged at the core of the trap array. Qin Yu didn't care when the Empyrean gods would arrive. However, he knew that if the Empyrean gods wanted to find him, they would definitely enter this trap array. "I reckon that I will be able to make a breakthrough in my soul's level within 100 years. When my divine energy transforms into heavenly divine energy, I should be able to open the third layer space of the Jianglan's realm. At that time, I would be able to see Li air." Qin Yu had a slight smile on his face. Qin Yu knew very well about his own soul's level. After being at the peak of the high-level deity for so many years, Qin Yu's comprehension of formation arrays had reached the level of level 4 formation arrays. The gap between high-level deity and low-level heavenly deity was broken by Qin Yu. In order to completely cross the threshold of heavenly deity, it shouldn't be a problem for him to do so within 100 years. Training in formation arrays was indeed a method to increase one's soul's cultivation. Qin Yu flipped his hand and took out a golden scroll. This golden scroll contained the detailed descriptions of level 7 and level 8 formation arrays written by the craftsman god Cheho Yuan. From level 1 formation arrays to level 6 formation arrays, Qin Yu was well aware of their derivation trajectory, from simple to complex. Although he had only reached level 4 formation arrays, Qin Yu was confident that as long as he had enough time, he would be able to reach level 6 formation arrays. However, level 7 formation arrays and level 8 formation arrays were extremely simple. One could tell just by looking at the description of level 7 formation arrays and level 8 formation arrays that a single scroll could contain. Exactly what are the profoundness of level 7 formation arrays and level 8 formation arrays? Qin Yu once again began to carefully read the scrolls. Generally, level 3 and 4 formation arrays would require a very long time to set up. As for level 5 and level 6 formation arrays, the amount of time required would be even lower. However, these level 7 and level 8 formation arrays could be set up within a couple breaths of time. Level 7 formation arrays appear to be very simple. However, why would such a simple formation array possess such a powerful might? Qin Yu was unable to understand. This was not the first time that Qin Yu had seen level 7 formation arrays. Even after looking at them for a long time, he was still unable to see through their profoundness. Thus, Qin Yu decided to look at the final formation array, the only level 8 formation array. Senior Chiho's highest achievement in formation arrays is indeed astonishing. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth are the 5 elements as the foundation. Yin and yang are the 2 extremes of darkness and light. Lightning is the punishment. Simple yet true. Merely, the might of this great formation array is truly too great. Qin Yu was unable to set up this great formation array himself. Thus, he was unable to personally experience the might of this formation array. Thus, he could only read Cheho Yuan's description of this great formation array. According to what Cheho Yuan said, once this great formation array was set up, there was no need for a formation base at all. It could absorb the berserk divine spiritual energy between the heaven and earth for its own use, and then form a miniature world. Its might was so great that unless one was a God King level expert, it would be impossible to break through it. Without a formation base, it could be said to be a miniature world without any flaws. Is it truly that powerful? Unfortunately, it is unknown whether Senior Cheho Yuan is still alive or not. If Senior Cheho Yuan was still alive, he would be able to personally witness the might of this great formation array. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. Suddenly, Qin Yu's ears moved. A smile appeared on his face. More heavenly deities have come? At this moment, there were indeed over a dozen heavenly deities gathered at the foot of Mount Biwichu. The leaders of this group of heavenly deities were a pair of sisters. This pair of sisters both possessed beautiful and enchanting appearances. The 2 sisters were also the only 2 mid-level heavenly deities among this group of over a dozen people. Big sister, why is there no one here other than us? That shouldn't be the case. There are many heavenly deities that have set off before us. Lu Yurao, who wore a pink gown, frowned and asked. Lu Yurao and Lu Yuyao were the famous enchanting sisters. The strength of these 2 mid-level heavenly deities was not to be looked down upon. Xin Yu Yang and Lan Shanhua, they have both set off before us. No matter what, there ought to be a lot of heavenly deities here. Lu Yuyao looked to Mount Biwichu in a very cautious manner. They have died on Mount Biwichu. We cannot also die here. Lu Yurao also lightly nodded. Right at the moment when the 2 sisters were bewildered, another dozen or so heavenly deities flew over from behind. Among these dozen or so heavenly deities, there was only a single mid-level heavenly deity. Enchanting sisters, I am truly happy to see the 2 of you here. A clear and bright voice sounded. The leader of the dozen or so heavenly deities, a cultured and refined white-clothed youth, was the first to land on the ground. Upon seeing the person who had arrived, Lu Yuyao and Lu Yurao immediately greeted him with a smile. We pay our respects to young Master Igong. Lu Yuyao and Lu Yurao had already heard of the great name Igong Shu. One must know that there were differences between mid-level heavenly deities. For experts like the 9-headed black dragon Tanjio, Lu Yushi and the others, it was not difficult for them to take on 5 or 6 mid-level heavenly deities by themselves. As for Igong Shu, he was someone on the same level as Tanjio. Igong Shu, who wore a scholar's headscarf and a white gown, lightly smiled and said, Enchanting sisters, why is it only the 2 of you here? Where's Miss Qi? I knew that she had already arrived. We didn't see her, said Lu Yuyao. Lu Yurao continued. When we set off from Yuqi City, we had already heard that Lan Shanhua, Xin Yu Yang, and the others had also come out. However, when we arrived here, we didn't see a single person. We reckoned that even if they didn't die, they would have been trapped in the Great Formation. Xin Yu Yang. Igong Shu frowned. That Xin Yu Yang is an expert in formation techniques. Could it be that even he was defeated by Qin Yu? Lu Yuyao and Lu Yurao also nodded. That's the only explanation we can think of. Igong Shu turned around and looked to Mount Biwichu. He was able to clearly sense that the entire Mount Biwichu was emitting different auras of formation arrays. His heart couldn't help but feel heavy. It would appear that the formation arrays set up by Qin Yu are very powerful. That's right, they are very powerful. Lu Yuyao and Lu Yurao also looked to Mount Biwichu. These 2 groups of close to 30 people looked to the quiet Mount Biwichu and felt their hearts trembling. They were able to imagine how many powerful formation arrays there were in this Mount Biwichu. The quiet Mount Biwichu was like a ferocious beast lying there. If anyone were to enter it, they would be devoured by this ferocious beast. At this moment, Igong-shu and the others did not dare to go forward. As time passed, 7 or 8 or even 2 or 3 heavenly deities arrived. The number of heavenly deities gathered at the foot of Mount Biwichu was also increasing. However, the more people that came, the more certain one thing became. Qi Hongfeng, Xin Yu Yang and Lan Shanhua, the 3 somewhat famous mid-level heavenly deities, had already been defeated on Mount Biwichu. After half a day, the number of heavenly deities had reached over 50. At this moment, the number of mid-level heavenly deities had also reached 5. Other than the enchanting sisters and Igong-shu, there was also the ice-cold beautiful heavenly deity Lu Bing. As for the final person, it was the 9-headed black dragon Tanjio. Tanjio, who had hidden himself for so many years, had finally shown himself today. Everyone, are we still going to wait? Lu Bing cast her gaze to the other 4 mid-level heavenly deities. Lu Bing had a tall stature. Her head of silver hair gave her a sense of coldness. Especially her pair of eyes. They seemed to be eternally emotionless. Lu Yiyao smiled charmingly and said, "Lil sis Lu Bing, don't be so anxious. 3 mid-level heavenly deities have already been defeated in there. Without absolute certainty, it's better to wait. The way I see it, we can set off to break the formation." A flash of light flashed through the eyes of the scholarly Igong-shu. Those 3 mid-level heavenly deities all possess average strength. As for us with me and the Black Dragon, it would be strange if we are unable to kill that Qinyu. Igong-shu was filled with confidence. At this moment, of the 5 mid-level heavenly deities, Igong-shu and Tanjio were the strongest. Igong-shu and Tanjio, any one of them possessed strength that surpassed the combined strength of Xin Yu Yang, Lan Shanhua, and the others. With the 2 of them present, there was indeed a very high chance of success. Since young Master Igong is in favor of setting off, I am also in favor of it, Tanjio said coldly. This time around, Tanjio had come to be the Oriole. However, to be the Oriole, one must possess a certain level of skill. If he were to wait until the very end, the other party would have already taken away the treasures. If he were to act then, wouldn't it be a waste of effort? Thus, he decided to show himself. Igong-shu smiled and said, "Very well, since Brother Black Dragon has agreed, this matter has become simple. What is important right now is who will be the leader of our 50-plus heavenly deities and control the overall situation." Lu Bing, Lu Yuyao and Lu Yurao all looked to Igong-shu and Tanjio. The leader of this group could only be either Igong-shu or Tanjio. If they were to become the leader, then they would have the authority to arrange everyone's matters. Naturally, they would have a greater chance of obtaining Qinyu's treasures. Igong-shu looked to Tanjio. He knew that this Lord Black Dragon was extremely hard to talk to. However, for the sake of obtaining Qinyu's treasures, Igong-shu was determined to become the leader. "I am not interested. Young Master Igong can be the leader," Tanjio said indifferently. Igong-shu was startled. He had prepared a lot of words to persuade Tanjio. Igong-shu immediately smiled and said, "Very well, since Black Dragon has said it like this, then I shall be the leader of these 56 heavenly deities. From now on, everyone must listen to my arrangements." Igong-shu's gaze swept past all the heavenly deities. None of the heavenly deities present resisted. Even the cold and arrogant Lu Bing did not object. After all, strength was the most important. Tanjio took a glance at Igong-shu. However, he sneered in his heart. "Did you think that Qinyu is that easy to deal with? Humph. The end result of being careless is death." Tanjio would never forget Qinyu's spear. At this moment, Igong-shu smiled and began to assign tasks. "Enchanting sisters, you all lead 20 low-level heavenly deities." Furthermore, right after he finished speaking, he suddenly stopped. 3 figures were rapidly flying over from the distance. "Everyone listen up. My lord has given the order to break through Mount Biwichu's great formation and kill Qinyu. For this matter, everyone must listen to my lord's order." A loud shout sounded from afar. The 56 heavenly deities on Igong-shu's side immediately began to discuss among themselves. Who could be this arrogant? It's only 3 people. They seem to be very powerful. Why should we listen to them? Jin Kong, it's Jin Kong and his brothers. Lu Yao suddenly said in shock. The brothers have all come. In that case, wouldn't their so-called lord be? Yi Gongshu and Tanjio's expressions both changed. Yi Gongshu's eyes grew cold. He even spat out 2 words. Mr. Qiuzhong. In the divine realm, mid-level heavenly deities were extremely powerful among the bandit powers. As for high-level heavenly deities, they were people that all the major powers would fight over. How many high-level heavenly deities would be willing to become bandits? In the eastern region of the divine realm, within the 64 great cities, the strongest bandit powers, Mr. Qiuzhong was the only high-level heavenly deity among the bandit powers of the eastern region. No one had expected that Qin Yu would actually be able to lure Mr. Qiuzhong over. After all, Mr. Qiuzhong already possessed a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. The situation has turned bad. Tanjio's expression grew gloomy. The reason why he had concealed the fact that Qin Yu possessed the spear-shaped Grand Mist spiritual treasure and the 9-petaled magnificent lotus was because he feared that he would attract people that were too powerful. Now that a high-level heavenly deity had arrived, how could he, Tanjio, possibly be able to take advantage of them? Chapter 544. Tanjio, Yi Gongshu, Lu Yuyao, Lu Yurao and Lu Bing. The 5 mid-level heavenly deities simultaneously bowed respectfully. We pay our respects to Mr. Qiuzhong. Qiuzhong Fu was a very proud person. He was not fond of being addressed as lord or boss by ordinary bandits. Instead, he requested others to address him as Mr. Qiuzhong Fu wore a blue cyan gown. Beside him were his 2 personal subordinates, Jin Kong and Jin Long. Under normal circumstances, wherever Qiuzhong Fu went, these 2 brothers would also be there. Amen. Qiuzhong Fu lightly nodded. In a while, I will break through the great formation and kill that Qin Yu. If Qin Yu possesses anything that I do not fancy, I will also give it to you all. However, I do not wish for you all to act on your own and not respect my orders. Understood? Understood. Even people as powerful as Yi Gongshu and Tanjio were extremely respectful. They did not dare to have the slightest bit of distracting thoughts. Qiuzhong Fu lightly nodded. He then ordered, Jin Kong, you are in charge of the arrangements for the people here. Remember, the number of low-level heavenly deities a mid-level heavenly deity will be determined by their strength. Yes, my lord. Jin Kong accepted the order respectfully. Then he coldly looked to the other mid-level heavenly deities. Lu Yuyao, you lead those 6 low-level heavenly deities. Jin Kong pointed with one hand and used his heavenly divine energy to circle 6 low-level heavenly deities. Yes. Lu Yuyao lightly smiled and accepted the order. One order after another was passed down. Lu Yuyao, Lu Yurao and Lu Bing led nearly 20 heavenly deities. The remaining heavenly deities were led by Tanjio and Yi Gongshu. Tanjio and Tanjio were extremely powerful. Thus, they were able to use their spatial domains much more easily than Lu Yuyao and the other 2 women. Brother Jin Kong, you all are not leading the low-level heavenly deities? Yi Gongshu said with a light smile. Jin Kong and Jin Long were always following Qiuzhong Fu. Thus their status was naturally very high. However, neither of them possessed strength inferior to Yi Gongshu. Thus their attitude toward Yi Gongshu was still very good. Of course we'll lead them. Our people are still behind us. Their flying speed is much slower than ours. Jin Kong said with a smile. Yi Gongshu and Tanjio cursed in their hearts. Wasn't this Qiuzhong Fu the heavenly deity? Everyone could guess Mr. Qiuzhong's motive. He was worried that Yi Gongshu and the others would snatch the treasure first. After a long while 23 low-level heavenly deities flew over from behind. These 23 low-level heavenly deities were Qiuzhong Fu's subordinates. Yi Gongshu and the others originally had 56 heavenly deities. With the addition of 23 heavenly deities, Qiuzhong Fu, Jin Kong, and Jin Long, they had 82 heavenly deities. The 82 heavenly deities were separated into 7 groups. They were respectively led by 7 mid-level heavenly deities. As for Qiu Zhongfu, he was standing in the sky by himself and looking to the top of Mount Bewitch You. Jin Kong, you 7 teams will work together to break the formation. If you discover any formation that you cannot break, come and tell me. Qiu Zhongfu calmly ordered. Yes. Jin Kong, Jin Long, Tanjiu, Yigongshu and the others all bowed in response. On the surface, everyone was extremely respectful. However, Tanjiu and Yigongshu were actually furious. Who wouldn't want to obtain Qin Yu's treasures? Now he was just a pawn for someone else. It wasn't that he was willing, but that he had no choice. If they dared to resist Qiu Zhongfu, Tanjiu and Yigongshu had no doubt that Qiu Zhongfu would directly kill them. The 7 teams soared into the sky at the same time. All of them had opened their spatial domains. Everyone had held back their strength. However, Tanjiu and Yigongshu's spatial domains were still 300 to 400 meters in circumference. As for the other 5, their spatial domains were only 100 meters in circumference. With everyone joining hands, ordinary illusion formations were simply unable to stop them. As for the attack formations, they were also unable to break through the spatial domains. Everyone very easily destroyed the surface of Mount Bewitch You and forcibly broke through the formation base. 1, 2, 3. In a blink of an eye, they had broken through over 20 great formations. When they broke through the 30th great formation, they finally stopped. Jin Kong said to Qiu Zhongfu, who was standing in the sky, "My lord, it's a bit difficult to break through this great formation." This was a relatively large trapping formation. It was a peak level 3 trapping formation. If Yigongshu, Tanjiu and the others were to spend a lot of effort, it was not impossible for them to break through it. However, at this moment, Yigongshu and the others were disinclined to spend a lot of effort. Oh! Qiu Zhongfu took a glance at this formation. He smiled indifferently and said, "It's merely a small formation. All of you step aside." The numerous heavenly deities immediately moved far away. Qiu Zhongfu merely grabbed at the air a couple times, and the space within that peak level 3 trapping formation completely shattered. One of the formation foundations of this trapping formation was immediately broken through. After breaking through one of the formation foundations, the might of the trapping formation had decreased greatly. Now even mid-level heavenly deities could be easily destroyed. "You all can continue," said Qiu Zhongfu coldly. Tanjiu and Yigongshu both shivered in fear. The range of space that high-level heavenly deities could destroy was different. Seeing how Qiu Zhongfu instantly destroyed the space, in terms of strength, he could be considered to be one of the more powerful high-level heavenly deities. Spatial destruction? Sure enough, he's a high-level heavenly deity. Qin Yu, who was in the dense forest of Mount Bewitch You, was quietly watching all of this. Seeing how easily Qiu Zhongfu destroyed a small region of space, Qin Yu's hopes of being lucky disappeared. If I were to rely on teleportation and the divine spear Waning Snow to kill this high-level heavenly deity. Qin Yu simulated the battle scene in his mind. In the end, he shook his head and said, "I have no certainty." Qin Yu knew very well that high-level heavenly deities not only knew spatial destruction, they also knew spatial domains. Furthermore, the binding power of their spatial domains was even greater than the spatial domains used by mid-level heavenly deities. Once Qin Yu were to enter the spatial domain, the divine spear Waning Snow would be greatly restricted. As such, its speed would definitely not be fast enough. And at this moment, the high-level heavenly deity was completely capable of attacking him instead. Although Qin Yu was able to escape using teleportation, he was unable to kill his opponent. As such, it was not worth it for him to reveal his trump card. Qin Yu, who was hiding in the middle of the dense forest, suddenly felt a gaze. Following the direction of the gaze, he discovered that it was Qiu Zhongfu who was in the distant sky. "He discovered me." Qin Yu was startled. "Qin Yu." Qiu Zhongfu's gaze grew cold. He suddenly shouted. His voice sounded like a myriad of divine thunders. At the same time, a tyrannical divine awareness directly rushed into Qin Yu's mind. Divine sense attack. Qin Yu felt a burst of rumbling in his head. And at this moment, that Qiu Zhongfu had shot down like lightning. Qiu Zhongfu's eyes were filled with confidence. He's merely a low-level heavenly deity. He received my divine awareness attack. By the time he woke up, he had already been captured by me. Divine sense attacks were also attacks of the soul. If the difference in their souls was too great, divine sense attacks were still a very fast way to attack. But if their strength was about the same, using divine sense to attack would result in both sides suffering. From Qiu Zhongfu's point of view, he was a high-level heavenly deity. If he were to use his divine awareness to attack a low-level heavenly deity, he would at least be able to make that low-level heavenly deity feel dizzy for quite some time. However, Qin Yu's soul was only shaken for a moment. Lu Xing's tears burst out with green light, and Qin Yu woke up in the blink of an eye. What a powerful high-level heavenly deity! Qin Yu sighed in his heart. Then, like a flash of lightning, he entered the level 4 trap array. Qiu Zhongfu was startled. He recovered this quickly. Could it be that he's a mid-level heavenly deity? Could it be that the information we gathered back then was wrong? If it was only a difference of a single level, then divine sense attacks would not have much effect. Hiding in the Great Formation would be of use? Qiu Zhongfu sneered. Inside the level 4 trap array, Qin Yu was currently faced with two choices. The first was to fight against this Qiu Zhongfu. The second was to escape and hide in the universal world. After causing such a large disturbance, Qin Yu truly did not wish for things to end so hastily. Bang! 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 Explosions were sounding non-stop outside. Qin Yu knew that some of the formations outside were being destroyed by those mid-level heavenly deities. Level 3 formations were indeed unable to stop Tanjiu and them for long. Qin Yu, are you really planning to hide in the Great Formation? Qiu Zhongfu's voice sounded. I urge you to come out. Otherwise, if you were to enter the spatial crack, no one would be able to save you. Inside the Great Formation, Qin Yu had a cold smile on his face. You want me to come out? Qin Yu completely understood what Qiu Zhongfu was thinking. As long as he was inside the Great Formation, this Qiu Zhongfu would not dare to forcibly use his spatial destruction to destroy the level 4 formation. That was because Qiu Zhongfu knew that he did not know where Qin Yu was in the level 4 formation. If he were to accidentally destroy the area where Qin Yu was in while trying to break the formation, then Qin Yu would enter the spatial crack. Even if Qin Yu were to die, the treasures he left behind would still be floating in the spatial crack. Qiu Zhongfu would not be able to obtain them. Thus, while Qin Yu could be killed, he could not bring Qin Yu into the spatial crack. Outside the level 4 formation, Qiu Zhongfu had an ice-cold expression. Behind him were 7 mid-level heavenly deities, leading a large group of low-level heavenly deities. Jin Kong asked in a low voice. Lord, what should we do now? You all stay here, I'll go break the formation. Like a meteorite, Qiu Zhongfu smashed into the Great Formation. As a level 4 trapping formation, the Great Formation that Qin Yu had set up, although it appeared to be only several hundred meters wide from the outside, it was over 10,000 meters wide from the inside. This was similar to the layout of the Bewitching God Temple. Not good. Sensing that Qiu Zhongfu had entered the Great Formation, Qin Yu had a bitter smile on his face. For the sake of killing me, this Qiu Zhongfu is willing to do such a tedious thing. There's nothing I can do about it. Qin Yu was able to predict what Qiu Zhongfu was going to do. This Qiu Zhongfu was going to use his spatial domain to investigate whether or not Qin Yu was in the area. If that area did not have Qin Yu, then Qiu Zhongfu would directly use his spatial destruction to destroy that area. The area of destruction was generally not large. However, from the inside of the Great Formation, one could sense that the space within the Great Formation was very large. In order to break the formation or coincidentally destroy the foundation of the formation, it was indeed very tedious. Buzz! 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 The sound of space being torn apart began to sound. That Qiu Zhongfu began to work tirelessly and began to destroy one small area after another. Many a little makes an ocean. In the end, he would definitely succeed. It was so easily broken apart by a high-level heavenly deity. Could it be that there's no formation capable of trapping a high-level heavenly deity? Qin Yu felt hatred in his heart. That level 8 formation suddenly appeared in Qin Yu's mind. That's right. That level 8 formation is capable of trapping high-level heavenly deities. Even high-level heavenly deities would not be able to escape from it. Unfortunately, I am unable to set it up. Qin Yu's entire body was suddenly stunned. He had a feeling of familiarity with that level 8 formation the entire time. However, he was unable to understand why it felt so familiar. After pondering for so long, at this moment, Qin Yu suddenly recalled what it was. Splitting heaven and earth. That's right, splitting heaven and earth. Qin Yu suddenly closed his eyes. At this moment, he felt that he had once again sensed the ancient aura of the flower paste space. The mysterious sensation of splitting heaven and earth, and creating the universal world, had once again descended upon him. Why was he so familiar with this level 8 formation? That was because the principle behind this level 8 formation was already very close to the principle behind splitting heaven and earth and creating the universal world. Back then, Qin Yu had created the universal world precisely because he knew what it was, but didn't know what it was. Although he was unable to understand the principle behind it, he had remembered that mysterious realm. At this moment, after entering the mysterious sensation of splitting heaven and earth, Qin Yu had completely seen the composition of the universal world in his mind. The pinnacle of formation techniques was merely to comprehend the spatial laws and create a space. Qin Yu did not comprehend the spatial laws. However, he possessed his own universal world. Thus, he naturally understood the spatial laws of the universal world. So that's the case. Qin Yu had a smile on his face. His hands casually streaked across the sky. Several rays of light flew out from Qin Yu's hands. Like Lu Xing, they landed in all directions of Mount Bewitch Yu. Formation Array Universe, form! Qin Yu lightly shouted. In a short instant, everyone within a range of several thousand meters, including Qiu Zhongfu who had just broken through the level 4 formation array, felt as if the world had turned upside down. The original scene had all disappeared. Instead, a vast and boundless earth had appeared in their surroundings. What's going on here? Qiu Zhongfu and the others were all stunned. Chapter 545. The Boundless and Vast Earth. Not a single cloud could be seen in the vast sky. Desolate and boundless. High-level heavenly deity Qiu Zhongfu, the 7 mid-level heavenly deities Tanjiu, Yigongshu and the rest, as well as the remaining 74 low-level heavenly deities, a total of 82 heavenly deities. These 82 heavenly deities were standing on this vast and boundless earth, and looking all around them. All of them had expressions of shock. Jin Kong unleashed his spatial domain. However, within the range of his spatial domain, the earth was still the earth. There was no change at all. Not only Jin Kong, even Jin Long, Tan Jiu and the rest were flying in all directions and using their spatial domains to investigate their surroundings. After a long time, Jin Kong flew over to Qiu Zhongfu and said in panic, "Lord, this is not an illusion. It's not an illusion." Tan Jiu, Yigongshu, Jin Kong, Jin Long, Lu Yuyao, Lu Yurao, Lu Bing and the rest of the 7 mid-level heavenly deities all had expressions of disbelief on their faces. As for the 74 low-level heavenly deities, they were also shocked and at a loss. Everyone could only look to Qiu Zhongfu, the number 1 bandit power in the eastern region of the divine realm, Mr. Qiuzhong. Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. Qiu Zhongfu suddenly looked behind him. Then he looked to his left and then to his right. Casually, he waved his hands and destroyed many spatial regions. Buzz! 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 Space was being torn apart unceasingly. Like a madman, Qiu Zhongfu destroyed over 1,000 regions in an instant. The rapid consumption of his soul's power had also caused Qiu Zhongfu's complexion to turn extremely pale. Qiu Zhongfu suddenly stopped. That was because he saw that the spatial regions that he had destroyed had been restored in the blink of an eye. Everything that he had done was useless. Creating an independent space? How could this be? Isn't this something that only God Kings who have comprehended the spatial laws are capable of? How did that Qin Yu accomplish this? Qiu Zhongfu muttered in disbelief. Shock, impatience and fear filled his eyes. After Qin Yu set up the formation array universe, He stood there in a daze. However, in his mind he had thought of a lot. In my heart, above the level 8 formation arrays, there should be level 9 formation arrays, and even level 10 formation arrays. However, the current me is unable to make any more breakthroughs. My successor, I'll leave the bewitching God Temple to you. I also hope that you will be able to help me pass on my title of Craftsman God. Work hard, my successor. Qin Yu still remembered the message left by the craftsman god Cheho Yuan. Above the 8th grade array formation, there were even more powerful ones. Only, the craftsman god Cheho Yuan had been researching for so many years, but he hadn't been able to comprehend a higher level formation. He had only managed to comprehend a formation of the 8th level. At this moment, Qin Yu suddenly understood. So that's how it is. There are thousands of great Daos, but in the end they are the same Dao. The pinnacle of array Dao is similarly comprehending spatial laws, and being able to set up a space yourself. Qin Yu relaxed in his heart. In the divine realm, for the past 12 quadrillion years, many formation geniuses had been diligently researching formation arrays. However, no matter how much they researched, even the craftsman god Cheho Yuan was only able to create a level 8 formation array. No wonder I found level 8 array formations more familiar. The principles behind level 8 array formations are only slightly simpler than the spatial laws of the universal world. I believe that with another breakthrough, level 9 array formations will be able to reach the level of spatial laws. When Qin Yu thought of all this, he felt embarrassed. The craftsman god Cheho Yuan had exhausted his heart and soul to create a level 8 array formation. As for Qin Yu, he had directly relied on the spatial laws of the universal world to create a perfect formation array space. The formation array universe that Qin Yu had created could no longer be considered as an ordinary formation array. Instead, it was a formation array space. If one were to rank this formation array, it would be a level 9 formation array. Cheho Yuan's level 8 formation array merely contained the embryonic form of a formation array space. He had yet to comprehend the spatial laws. However, Qin Yu's formation array universe contained the spatial laws of the universal world. A perfect spatial law would naturally be able to create a perfect formation array space. I've gotten lucky here. However, the spatial laws of the universal world are completely different from the spatial laws of the divine realm. Qin Yu smiled. He looked at the formation array space with a circumference of several thousand meters before him and stepped into it. Upon stepping into the formation array space, everything within the formation array space appeared in Qin Yu's mind. However, at this moment, Qin Yu felt a burst of strangeness. This formation array space was actually affected by two spatial laws. One was the spatial laws of the universal world that had set up this formation array. The other was the spatial laws of the divine realm. As long as one was within the range of the divine realm, one would definitely be affected by this spatial law. The spatial laws of the divine realm are actually affected everywhere. Qin Yu frowned and started to ponder. Qin Yu suddenly recalled that Lu Shui, Hong Yu, Wu Lan and the others were unable to sense the descent of the divine tribulation in the universal world. Combining all of this, Qin Yu had a reason. Could it be? Qin Yu thought of a shocking matter. There are countless cosmic spaces in the mortal realm. There are also a lot of cosmic spaces in the immortal, devil, and demon realm. The highest level is the divine realm. These three levels of cosmic spaces, no matter where one is, one would have to accept the heavenly tribulation. At the same time, one would also be affected by the spatial laws. Qin Yu still remembered it clearly. Back then, Uncle Lan Li Air Zhou Xian and the others were able to easily cut open space in the mortal realm. That was not through strength. Instead, it was through the comprehension of space. The two spatial laws represented two different paths. Could it be that the mortal realm, immortal devil and demon realm, divine realm, and all the other spaces are a whole? Everything within this whole space would be affected by the spatial laws it possesses. Everything would be affected by the heavenly tribulation? Qin Yu became even more clear in his heart. If the 8 great sage emperors were to know what Qin Yu was thinking, they would all be shocked. Indeed, everything was as Qinyu had thought. The mortal realm, the immortal devil and demon realm, the large amount of parallel cosmic spaces, and the peak divine realm. When combined, they would be a universe. Within this universe, they would all be affected by the same spatial laws and the same temporal laws. A complete universe would only possess one spatial law and one temporal law. If I were to think of it this way, then my universal world would possess its own spatial laws. In that case, the result of my universal world's next evolution would be. Qinyu felt as if a thunderbolt had flashed through his mind. He immediately became enlightened. The 10th stage of the stellar transformations was the universe realm. Was the universe realm the end? At this moment, Qinyu was absolutely certain that this was not the end. Aha! Stellar transformations. Master, I finally know the true evolution of the great Tao. So that's how it is. So that's how it is. Qinyu stood in the sky. His face was filled with excitement. The feeling of comprehending everything was so wonderful. Suddenly, haha, my path is not alone. Very abruptly, this voice sounded throughout the entire divine realm. The voice was boundless and loud. It was unceasingly reverberating throughout the entire divine realm's oceans, valleys, swamps, seas of fog, deserts and other places. My path is not alone. My path is not alone. My path is not alone. This voice was unceasingly reverberating throughout the entire divine realm. This voice reverberated throughout the entire universe. Regardless of whether it was the outside world or one's mind, this voice penetrated through everything. At this moment, Extreme East's Mount Dazzling Gold, Extreme North's Floating Snow City, Extreme South's Light Lens City, Extreme West's Mount Blazing Flame, Northwest's Thunder Punishment City, Northeast's Forest Ocean City, Southeast's Underground City, Southwest's Jade Ripple Lake, Azura Sea, Mount Blood Demon, Dual Domain Island. All the god kings of the 11 major powers were jolted awake. Regardless of whether they were cultivating in seclusion, playing or teaching their disciples, all of them stopped at this moment. All the god kings of the 11 major powers raised their heads to look at the sky. In the North Pole Sage Emperor's palace, Uncle Zhou Xian was still speaking when the voice that resounded throughout the entire divine realm reverberated throughout the entire floating snow city. It reverberated throughout the North Pole Sage Emperor's palace. One must know that there was an ancient barrier in the North Pole Sage Emperor's palace. Generally, the sound from the outside world would not be able to enter. The utmost North Pole Sage Emperor Jiang Fan extended his hand to stop Zhou Xian from speaking. With a movement of his body, he arrived in the airspace above the floating snow city. He wore a black emperor gown with golden edges. At the same time, a youth wearing a purple gown instantly appeared beside Jiang Fan. This person was the Heaven's Heart God King of the floating snow city, Jiang Xing. Other than these two people, Jiang Lan wearing a cyan gown also appeared beside them. The three great god kings were all standing in the airspace above the floating snow city. They were looking at the sky. Such a large movement, exactly what happened? Who was it that said my path is not alone? Jiang Fan asked in a low voice. The purple gown Jiang Xing guessed. Clan Chief, I remember that when a new exalted celestial was born last time, this sort of voice that resounded throughout the entire divine realm, including one's mind and soul, had also occurred. The birth of a new exalted celestial. Jiang Fan shook his head and said. However, no exalted celestial has been born yet. Second brother, do you know what is going on? Jiang Lan smiled indifferently and said. I presume the three exalted celestials know about this matter. However, those three exalted celestials do not possess a close relationship with our Jiang clan. Even if they knew, they would not necessarily tell us. Furthermore, the status of our 8 great divine families has already been determined. Even if it is an exalted celestial, they would not be able to move us. Thus, what is there to worry about? Big brother, there is no need for you to think too much about it. Let's return. Jiang Lan lightly laughed. After that he disappeared into thin air. Second brother is truly open-minded. Jiang Fan lightly laughed. With a wave of his emperor gown, he also disappeared. Perhaps that existence, that spoke was deliberately trying to create a reign of terror in the divine realm. The sound of this voice had indeed woken up all of the God Kings in the divine realm. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.